Hello, 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 folks. How we doing today? I hope everyone is having an excellent weekend so far. Happy Labor Day for those in the U.S. Hey, LT Swift, how's it going? I hope you're having a good weekend. Hey, Faster, how are ya? We get started here in about 1 minute. Hi, everybody. How's my audio? Can everybody hear me okay? Also, there should be closed captions available for anybody who wants or needs them. They are turned on, so you can navigate to the right side of your stream window and click on the closed caption button if you'd like to turn those on or off. Supabase squirrel, yeah. Audio is great. Good to hear, Faster. Thank you. Hey, Copper Lily. Captions looking good. Great. I remember to turn them on right away this time. Yeah, indeed. Alrighty, the timer has counted down, so let's get right into it, shall we? Hi, everybody. Dan Kim Code says, y'all are fast. Yeah, we got folks on the ball today. I dig it. Yeah, I hope everybody's having a good weekend so far. Like I said, happy Labor Day. Um, I went to a football game yesterday and I got a horrendous sunburn on like one side of my neck and shoulder. So that's why my hair is on this side today because it's unsightly. So, well, it's not too bad, but still. It would distract me if I could see it in the camera view. So my hair is parted on the other side today to cover my sunburn. And yes, I was wearing sunscreen and a hat and a long sleeve shirt, but the sun came for me anyway. So, there's only so much you can do. But I hope everybody else has been enjoying their weekend. And as far as what we are doing today we are building a full stack app like we do a lot of the time, right? Except we are today we're going to be using a different type of backend than we normally use. So for most of the folks who are in 100 devs who watch these streams, the database of choice for 100 devs is MongoDB. Which, as you all know, is a object-based, document-based type database, right? You add something to MongoDB, it puts it in there as an individual document, right? And each individual document is independent from all the other entries in the database. However, the last couple weeks, I've been introducing everybody to SQL or relational databases, which are the other major type of database, and arguably, well, I shouldn't say arguably, they are the more popular type of database out there in the world that you will encounter as you're working out there in the world as a developer. And so it's important to be familiar with both document-based and relational type databases. So for the last couple of weeks, I've been teaching the basics of SQL, which is structured query language, which is the language that you use to talk to relational databases. However, we haven't really built anything with that, right? We've been learning SQL to talk directly to the database, but what you all want to know is how do I build an app around that, right? Like, how do I build an app that actually uses a relational database as a backend? And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be building a very simple app using a Supabase Postgres backend. Dan says, I hope it heals and feels better, referring to my sunburn. The nuclear fireball in the sky loves no one. Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday was a cloudless day. I was sitting in those bleachers at that football game and just going, like, this is like, I was so hot the whole time. It was fun, though. It was a really fun game, but man, I could just tell, like, you'd feel the radiation just irradiating my skin through my 70 SPF sunscreen. Carpelli says, feeling like a wizard since I figured out how to connect VS Code to Superbase. Yeah, absolutely. VS Code, if y'all didn't know, you can actually do things like write SQL queries directly in VS Code instead of using the Superbase web GUI like we have been using. VS Code can connect to most major database types directly in your VS Code window. You can establish connections to most major database types, and so that can be a great way to interact with databases and including things like Superbase. Yeah. Engineer Moore, hey Engineer Moore, good to see you. Hey Ahmed, hey Wusa. Dan says the app is you just give people the SQL connection string and be like, here, help yourself. Well, as we'll come to see, connecting a full stack app to a Supabase database is actually fairly straightforward, and you will see that it carries a lot of similarities to how you would set up a MongoDB database. So yes, it may be a different type of database, but the mechanisms are very similar. So I think you'll come out of this being fairly confident in able to do CRUD operations against the Supabase database if you would like to do so. Hey, Jupiter. Good to see you. And as Mubat very timely posted in chat, that is a link to the repo that we are going to be working with today. So if you'd like to see the finished code, you can head on over to GitHub and look for the Supabase CRUD repo. Should be the most recent one on my GitHub. Just click that link or navigate to my profile in GitHub and find it there. I also have a pretty good README on how to get this project set up. We're of course going to walk through it here on stream together. But if you're coming to this later, if you're watching the video later, or you just want to, check the boxes as you go, I set up a pretty decent README, I think, on how to get this bad boy going. All right. Hey, Icefire, good to see you. So, any questions before we get started? Alrighty. And as always, feel free to ask questions at any point. Don't ever feel like you're interrupting me or asking a stupid question, because if you have a question, that probably means that somebody else has that same question. They are just not brave enough to ask it. So if you have a question at any point, feel free to ask. All right, so what are we building today? Well, today we are just building a very simple to-do list, classic. Let me see. I should have had this aligned left, but hey, whatever. So we're just building a very simple to-do list app, but it does all of the CRUD operations. By that I mean it does create, read, update, and delete, which are the four main components of things you need to do with a database, right? So what this does is allows you to add a task. I'm going to say sweep floors. And so we can click add. It has been added. We can also toggle it as complete or incomplete. So there you see when I clicked on toggle, it marks it as complete or incomplete. And then we can also delete those tasks. And the other thing we can do is also edit these. So if I double click on this task, it brings up an edit option. So I can make a change there, took off the S, I click away, and now it's been updated. And you can see the GUI updates as such. And so looks pretty par for the course, right? We've all built apps like this before. But the main difference here, obviously, is that we are using a Supabase backend. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. So in Supabase, I have a project, and this app is writing to a table called to-dos. And in that table, there are three columns: ID, task, and is completed. So if I run a quick query on that table using SQL, like we've talked about the last couple weeks, I'm going to ask you guys, my table is called to-dos, right? What would I do if I wanted to see all the information in the to-dos table? If I wrote a query in my SQL editor here, what would I write to get all the rows in the to-dos table? Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. We can do select star from to-dos. So I've already done that. Let's see. And I even did a little order by here, but this is really all you need. You can say select star from to-dos, and that will also give you everything that's in the table, right? And so you can also do additional things here, like ordering by ID, which is what I've done here, which puts them in ascending order or descending order, that kind of thing. But yeah, so this is an example of using SQL to talk directly to a database. However, when you're doing it through an app, that works slightly differently. But for me anyway, the cool thing about using a relational database as your backend is that you have the freedom of choice. So you can do CRUD operations against your database through your app, right? Like your users are going to do, but then you can cut through all that you can cut through the middleman, and you can go straight into the SQL editor and start writing queries against your database directly. So as the developer, you can get a lot more information more quickly about the data that your users are entering if you're using a relational database where you can just write SQL queries and talk to it directly versus something like a MongoDB database where it's a lot more difficult to see the data in aggregate, right? To see, all the data and all the documents in your collection. That's a lot harder. So this is one of my favorite things about using a relational database as a backend is that you can just have your users write to it through your app and then go in here and do all kinds of analytics and troubleshooting and that kind of thing directly with SQL in your database. There's a question here. Are relational databases faster than non-relational databases? That's a great question, and I'm going to say it depends. And as Dan said, you probably can't say they're faster. That's correct. They're probably similar for many queries, especially at smaller scales, but they do diverge in what they can do. Exactly right. So there's different reasons why, in some cases, you would want to use a document database versus a relational database. And if you're curious about, when one might be better than the other, I would suggest checking out my SQL stream from 2 streams ago. So my first stream on SQL, we talked a lot about differences in database types and when one might be better than the other, and why neither is objectively better than the other. They're just good at different things. So that's why they both exist, right? They wouldn't exist if they weren't good for something. 6Js, welcome to the stream. Just got to the Mongo Star Wars tutorial. Interested to see SQL instead of Mongo. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in the basics of SQL, just like this type of SQL right here, where you're talking directly to the database, once again, I would suggest checking out my last 2 streams that are still here on Twitch. I'll be moving them to YouTube soon. But yeah, check out my last 2 streams if you're interested in just writing raw SQL without an app, because we talk a lot about the basics of that and getting you up and going there. Dan says, I just got to views in my video course. Views are amazing. Yeah, views are really cool. They're a great way to sort of capture queries or capture subsets of tables and manipulate tables in a repeatable way. Ellen says, I like playing with JSON files. Yeah, there's a lot you can do. All right. So here we can see that this is indeed the back end for the app that we're running. So let's go ahead and get started in actually building this bad boy, shall we? All righty. I think I'm caught up with chat. Okay, so how do we get started? Well, first thing is you're going to need to set up an account with Supabase. This is fairly easy to do. You can just go to supabase.com, and I'll put that in chat. And I believe I've connected to it using my GitHub account. I think that's like the preferred method. So there's the URL. Go ahead and get set up, get an account made, and I think you have to set up like an organization as well. It doesn't really matter what you call it. And then within your organization, you'll start setting up, that's where you'll start setting up various projects. So let me know when y'all are ready after you've all got your account set up and you're signed in, and you are at essentially you'll be at this screen where it lets you create a new project. So I'll give you guys a minute to do that. Icefire says, we create it by selecting create new project. I think, yes. So, but most folks, I think, don't even have an account yet. So I'm giving folks a minute to just, get signed up for Superbase. But yes, this is where we'll be headed once everybody's there and ready to go. Copper Lily's ready. Good deal. Also, and if you're new to my streams, I do recommend that you code along with me. Of course, you're always welcome to watch, but you'll learn best if you are able to actually code along. And the GitHub repo is always there. If you get mixed up or turned around or confused by what's going on, and you want to spot check what you've done, the GitHub repo is always there. You can get to it at any point by saying !project in chat. So !project in chat is the command to pull up the repo. Spokal says, "Do we need to know React for this?" So we are going to be building this in React today, but we're going to be walking through it pretty slowly, and it's just a one page app, so it's pretty simple, and the principles are very similar to uh, like a JavaScript app. So I would say even if you don't know React, stick with us, um, and you might learn a little bit about React at the same time you learn a little bit about Supabase. All right, I like the attitude, Spokal. Ooh, I like React. Yeah. This is a dead simple little React project. Like I say, one page. I think React is nice for a project like this in that because we're doing calls to the database, we're doing a lot of updates to the user interface. Doing it in React is better than having the page reloading all the time. So, all right, how are we doing? Are we good to to walk through the steps of creating our project? It's okay to say no. It's okay to say you're still working on it. Just trying to get a feel from folks where you're at. Norgo says, "Will this be recorded?" Yes, it's being recorded. It'll be available on Twitch actually right now. You can go to my videos tab on my channel right now if you want to like retroactively watch the recording as this is going. Yeah, it's available. Drunko Grandma says, "I had it up and running before your stream started." I'm good. I'm glad the README on the repo worked pretty well for you. Hey, Interplanet. All right. Well, if Supabase is having trouble connecting to GitHub or anything like that, um, yeah, you can go right now. You can go back to my Twitch channel. You can click on the videos tab and you can rewind this and you can watch the recording. Like you can watch the live stream as a recording and stop and pause and rewind and all that stuff. So you won't be a live viewer. You won't be able to chat, but you will be able to watch the recording and take as long as you need. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started on this as a new project. And the first thing it'll ask is what organization do you want to be a part of? Just choose whatever your default org is. So choosing this one. And it essentially just says, "Hey, do you want to pay for this?" And you say, "No, I do not want to pay." You're going to say free. Oh, okay. So I got to delete a project. It's telling me that I've exceeded my free project limit. Hang on. I'm going to get rid of this one. I want to, how do I get rid of a project? 2 seconds. I want to delete you. Deletes. Delete. All right, let's see if I can do this now. So that's good to know. There's a 2 project limit for free. Ow. All right. We'll go ahead and delete this Code Wars one. I don't really want to do that. Oh, actually, no. I'm going to pause this one. Pause. There we go. So 2 seconds. This will only be a problem if you have multiple projects like I do. But for your first project, this shouldn't be a problem. Failed to pause. Interesting. Well, I can just delete it if I need to. Oh, okay. I think it may be inactive. All right, let's try this. So now I'm going to go back home. There. Okay, so it's paused. So it gave me the error message, but it still paused it. So if anybody else is having that problem, if you go back to the main screen, you'll probably see that it's been paused. Oh, I meant to pause the Code Wars one. Did I pause? Well, it doesn't really matter as long as one of them is paused. Okay. So I'm going to call this one, we'll call this one React to do. And then I'm going to give it a password. You can have it auto-generate a password if you want. I'll upgrade to the Mega Premium Uber plan. No, thank you. All right, now we'll go ahead and create this. It takes a minute to spin up the database, but only a minute. So you can see we're initiating project setup. Pause all projects, yeah. Still going. Yeah, you can name your projects whatever you want as long as you know what they are. It's kind of like how you do the same thing in MongoDB, right? You can have different projects, and now it's ready. So we're ready to go. Our database is spun up. So now, next thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and create the table that we're going to be writing to. So I need to name mine one job, please. Nice. So there's a couple different ways that you can create a table inside of a database, inside of a relational database, or inside of a Supabase database. Now, this is slightly different than the way you would do things in MongoDB, because in MongoDB, you set up your schema, right? You set up your schema inside of the app itself. And then that schema controls what gets written into your MongoDB collection, right? But in a SQL database or in a relational database, you have to set up your table structure in the database itself, because relational databases are table based. So it's like just a bunch of tables with rows and columns, and that's where data gets written to. So the first thing you have to do is you have to set up that scaffold, that blueprint, that structure of the tables that you're going to be writing to before you can start writing data to your database. SQL DDL. Yeah. So it's essentially, yeah, we're gonna write a statement, and we're gonna execute that statement, and that statement is going to build a table in our database for us. You could also set up a table in your database by clicking on the database button here on the left. So your menu's over here. You've got various things you can do. And you can say new table, which is behind chat right now. But if you go to the same place here, you'll be able to see it. Actually, I'll do this. Move it over so you can see it better. So right now we have nothing, right? You can say new table, and you can do it like this, and you can manually set up your columns this way. However, if you know just a little bit of SQL, it's much, much, much faster to build your tables with a single SQL statement rather than trying to mess with this sort of slightly clumsy GUI building your columns this way. So we're going to write our table using a SQL query, and it's really easy to do. Yes, I love FTL, Dan. One of the games in my games list is indeed FTL. It's one of my favorite games of all time. All right, so we're going to head over to the SQL editor right here. And if you've tuned in to my streams in the last couple weeks, you're probably pretty familiar with this editor now. But if not, that's okay. I'm going to show you exactly what to do. So inside of the SQL editor here, we're actually going to go to the GitHub API, or to the GitHub repo, and I'm just going to copy this statement that I put in the README, and we're going to paste it in here. And I'm going to format it a little bit so it looks better. And we'll talk about what each part is doing. There we go. All right, so SQL is written in a declarative way, so it's almost like you're telling. I like to think of it like you're a monarch, like a king or a queen or a regent. You're sitting on your throne, and you have a bunch of staff that are in your throne room, and you're telling them what to do. Like you're giving them regal commands, orders. You're telling them to go do things, and that's kind of how you do SQL. So you can go tell your squire to go write a document for you, right? To go write a royal decree for you. but you can't necessarily control what order they do that in, or how exactly they do that. And that's kind of how SQL works, right? You give the orders and it just goes and does it. You don't say how it gets done. You don't really care how it gets done, but you just tell SQL to go do things to your database. Bring me a shrubbery. Exactly. Yes, stuff like that. And so that's what we're doing here. We're literally ordering, we're giving an order here. We're saying create table. And here we give the table name. And then inside of the parentheses here, this is where we define what our table is going to look at, it's going to look like. So if you're familiar with MongoDB schemas, this is very, very similar to that. So Mongoose schemas are very, very similar to what relational databases do by design. So Mongoose is like an extra thing that's trying to mimic what relational databases do by default. So here we define the name of each column. And here we define what data type it is. So SQL is a typed language. It relies on certain types. And if you try to write something to a column, that if you try to write a number to a string column, it's not going to let you do that. You will get an error. So you have a built-in data validation in a relational database. So that's essentially what we're doing here. We're defining what type these are. So this first one looks a little weird, but all it's really doing is it's setting up a counter. So pay my taxes. So in a MongoDB database, you know that every document you write gets assigned an ID by default. So when I write a document to the database, it automatically gets assigned an ID, right? A unique ID. And we're doing the same thing here. We're just saying, hey, in the to-dos table, I'd like there to be a column called ID, and it's going to be serial. So it's going to count up by one. For every record that we write, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. And that's going to be used as the unique ID for that table. So it will be a unique value. So we can use it as the primary key. And you know key value pairs from objects in JavaScript, right? Key value pairs. The key is the unique value that lets you identify a certain part of the object, right? And it's the same thing in SQL. The key, the primary key, allows you to identify a unique row in a SQL table. So the primary key is always going to be unique. And so if I say ID 7 in a SQL table, I will always get a single record in that table. So our second column is called task, and that's a string. So it's a what we call a varchar type, so which is variable character. So it's a character, and it's got a maximum length of 255, which is fine in this case. TV Justice, I think this is Postgres. You can use text instead of varchar. Yeah, so there's different flavors of SQL, and Superbase uses Postgres, which is the open source version of SQL. There's all sorts of different data types you can use for text. You can use cars, you can use varchars, you can use text. Yeah, there's all sorts of different ones. I'm using varchar here because it translates across whatever version of SQL you're using. So you can use varchar, I think, in pretty much every version of SQL. So I'm trying to use ones that are pretty universal. And then the last one here is completed, and this is a Boolean. So if I set this data type for this column as a Boolean, what can I write to this column? What am I going to be allowed to write to this column? Yeah, exactly. Yep. So it's either going to be true or false. And yeah, that can be, and it's only going to allow either true values or false values to be written. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, Dan, I don't recall off the top of my head exactly what the limit is for text. Um, but we're going to go ahead and use varchar here. Although there's, hey, there's no wrong way to do this. You can research the different data types for Postgres and, make your own decision what you think is best.
Gray
Oh, thank you
Fabler
for the
is
follow,
followed.
Gray Fabler. Thank you. Okay, good to know, TV Josh. Alrighty. So this is our table, and all we need to do to create this table is simply run this statement. So you click run, and it says success, no rows returned. And now what's nice is that Supabase will save this query, so we can always come back to it later if we need to. And if we look inside of our, let's see, we'll go here to the, we'll go to the database here. That'll show it to us. We go back to our database here. It will show us our table. So now our to-dos table has been created. And if we click on the columns button, we can see what columns are in there. So these are the columns in our table. You can edit them. You can delete columns this way. It just kind of reminds you what your table structure is. So now that we've created our structure, we can actually start establishing a connection to the app, or to the database, and eventually write things to it. So we're going to do one more thing in here. I'm going to show you where your project URL and API key is, because that's what we're going to put in the app. And then we'll go into VS Code and we'll actually start to build the app itself. All right. So any questions about building the table, or what we're doing here, or what this is for, before we go into locating your API keys? What's the int for? Oh, I believe this is just the general data type. So if we go to, let's see, I'll look at it here. Nope. I was trying to see if I could, if we look at creating a table this way, you can see it gives you plenty of different types you can choose from. And so these are just the number of bytes in your integer. So if you just create a table like with type int, it's going to choose the middle one. This is essentially like how large they can be. And if you ask me, off the top of my head, I don't know, how large each of these are going to be. But you have a few different options when you're choosing data types. And so by default, if I created a table using a create statement, it chose int4 as the data type. You can always change the types later if they need to be larger, but I'd have to look that up just to remember how big each of them are. UTF. Oh man, UTF-8. Don't get me started, man. A large integer type with a precision of 31 bits. Cool. So for the most part, you're not going to care about that. I'll be honest. You can use the general data types. You can, use integer. If you have integers, which is, like a whole number, right? If you have integers, use integer. It's going to be okay. You can always modify it if you need to. You can change data types later on, but you're going to be fine for the most part. Renit says 4-byte integer. Yeah, it's pretty large, right? It's pretty large. So don't sweat about it too much. Yeah, I've rarely ever had to worry about that. So yeah, they chose int4 for us automatically, and that'll be just fine. Yeah, UTF-8 has been causing me big headaches at work, Dan. I'll tell you that. Yeah, we've got systems coming in with systems trying to write emojis into our database. It's been interesting. Emojis and weird Unicode text, yeah, into our database, and it's causing all sorts of havoc. So that's been a fun time. We had to build special filters to we have a filter at work that's called the emoji filter, and its only purpose is to look for emojis in incoming data and filter them out. Dan says, I had a problem where a new table I created didn't have the same setting as a previous table, and I couldn't do joins. Yeah, so if you're trying to join between two incompatible data types, you might have a problem. You can cast between data types for existing tables if certain conditions are met. But yeah, it can be a little challenging sometimes. Emoji filter. Yeah, sounds useful. Yeah, it really is. It's cut down on the number of errors quite a bit. We had to have somebody figure out enough regex to make it work. None of us are great at regex. All right, so I'm assuming everybody's gotten this far at least. You've built your table. Once again, if you need that create statement, it's over here in the GitHub repo. So exclamation point project, if you need that, it's down in the README. I have the create statement right here. Just paste that in there, run it, and it'll build your table for you. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you where to get your API, your project URL and your API information, your secret key, so to speak. So in order to get that, you're going to want to go to project settings and then choose API. So this is going to give you the things you need. It's going to give you your project URL and it's going to give you your API key. So when we get to the point where we're going to be putting this into our project, Grace795, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having a good day. So when we get to the point where we're actually connecting to Supabase, you're going to want to have both of these, so project URL and your anonymous API key, and so they allow you to copy both of those. So you don't have to grab them now. I just want to show you where they're at. So once we get there, you'll know where to find them. All right. So any last questions on Supabase? Otherwise, we will swap over to VS Code and start building our project. Dan says, anybody know if Supabase lets you connect directly to the underlying Postgres? I'm guessing it doesn't. So are you meaning bypass Supabase entirely and just like, are you meaning connect to the database through VS Code without using Supabase at all? I'm just trying to make sure I understand your question. Connect directly to the underlying Postgres. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. If anybody else does, feel free to chime in. I'm assuming that if you are, connecting from VS Code, it's you're probably going to be doing it through like a Supabase extension that you add to VS Code. But you can always make it your own, Postgres database like locally and connect directly to that if you'd like to. But all right, anyway, let's go ahead and head on over into VS Code and start building on our project. So I've already created a project folder, and I'll zoom in a little bit because I know that's super small. Pop this over here. Here we go. All right, so I've created a project folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open the terminal. You can connect to the database using any tool which supports PostgreSQL. Yeah. Okay. So is that what you're asking? Yeah. You can connect VS Code via like the connection strings. I mean, yeah. I just wasn't quite sure what you were going for there. Yeah. So in Supabase, like they give you a bunch of different ways to connect. So you can probably definitely do some research on that and probably figure it out in the next, few minutes and let us all know if you want. I haven't tried that, but hey. All right. So we're going to build our project using React today. So we could use Vite or something else. You can use whatever tool you prefer to get your React apps up and running, but we're going to use Create React App because that's the tried and true method. Although Vite is great as well. I'm not knocking Vite at all. We've used it quite a bit on this on my streams as well. So I'm going to say create React app, and then I'm going to give it a name of just Supabase to do demo. I think it doesn't allow capital letters, so I'm going to make mine all lowercase. Oops, sorry. I forgot to do npx create React app. My bad. npx create React app, and then Superbase to do demo. There we go. And it's going to take a moment to create the app for us. And if you haven't used Create React App before, what it does is it essentially builds the whole structure of the app. And it builds up, it builds up the entire structure, including a local Git repo, a README file, yeah, pretty much everything you need, actually more than we're going to need here, for a basic React app. Icefire says, oh, many errors? Where are you getting errors, Icefire? All right, it's almost done. With the npx command. Well, do you normally use something different like yarn? So I'll paste, if anybody needs this command, I will paste that into chat here. If anybody needs that. There you go. I don't remember if I have it in the README or not, but yes, there you go. So it's just npx create -react -app, and then you give it a name, whatever name you want. So Supabase to do demo, that's the name I just chose for mine, but it can be whatever name you want. And so now that it's done, let's see, it says it's done. And it says we suggest that you begin by typing cd Supabase to do demo and then npm start. So what this is telling us to do is essentially we are inside of this parent folder right here. So you can see I'm in parent folder. We need to cd into the directory or change directory into the directory where our project actually lives. And that's what's going to allow us to install, dependencies and that kind of thing. So this is where it's set up this whole project for us. And we need to just cd into that. So you can copy this or type it out. It doesn't matter. We cd. Now we're in our project. We can see we're inside of our Git repo now. And now we're ready to actually work with it. Oh, good. You figured it out, Icefire. Nice. Way to go. Oh, you did create _react_app. Yes. Yeah. So it is dashes in that command. It is dashes. And now in your project name, you can put in underscores, but the command itself uses dashes. So good troubleshooting. Yeah. It's okay if you haven't done React. Like I say, we're going to talk through it as we go. This is a fairly simple React project just because the main point is more about connecting to the database itself. All right, so you've got your project and there's a lot of files in here. We're not going to care about most of them. We're only really going to be working in one file and then adding like one more. So don't worry about, how many files are here. We're going to be getting rid of most of them. So don't worry about it. All right, now we do need to install one dependency, just one. So unlike a vanilla JavaScript project where we have to, always start by installing a bunch of stuff and do npm init and all that stuff, you don't have to do that with Create React App. Create React App has already initialized, done npm init for you. So you can see you've got a package JSON file here already. It's installed a bunch of dependencies for you already. And so essentially what we're going to do is we're only going to add one more thing. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Yeet and delete. Yeah, for the most part. He even created a README for you. Yeah. File count anxiety. Yeah. Well, if you look at the repo, it has way fewer files because I did clean it up. So, but for now, let's just go ahead and focus on installing the one dependency that we need, and that's just Supabase. So we're essentially just going to install Supabase so that we can start building out our queries to the database, just like you would install Mongoose, right? Just like you would install Mongoose for your MongoDB project, we're going to install Supabase. And so once again, I have that in the repo. So install Supabase using this command. It's going to be npm install @supabase/supabase.js, and that's in the README right here. So there you go. And I will also put it in chat. So that's the command. Oh, looks like it just accidentally added. If there's a user out there named Supabase, they just got added in chat. So sorry, Supabase. Hi, sponsor me. Um, all right. So npm install at supabase/supabase.js, and that's going to install that package for us. This is the only thing we're going to need to install. All right, and it's going to say, oh, high security vulnerabilities, whatever. Don't worry about that. It's fine. You're okay. Nothing is wrong. It's installed. And if we go over into our package.json, you will see that it has installed Supabase for us under dependencies. And so now we are good to go. Yeah, so Nerd Girl, so you're getting errors. You could always just kind of go back. You could always just empty that folder and try again. So just try doing the create npx create React app, give it a name, and try again. When you do your create React app, your project name should be all lowercase letters. It doesn't like capital letters in project names. So that could be something that has gone wrong. But yeah, let us know if there's anything that we can help with. And yes, that's correct. Good point there by Dan. You do need to have Node installed in order to do any of this. But if you've ever built an app before, I'm going to assume that you do have Node installed. However, if you've never built an app before and you're running into problems, it could be that you don't have Node installed. In which case, I would suggest you're going to have to go and do that and then come back to this later because it takes a hot minute to install Node. Oh, Nerd Girl, you may have been in the wrong folder. I always create a new folder for every single one of my projects, and then I create the app in that folder. So it could have been that you were already in a folder with a Git repo, and then you tried to create a project in that folder that already had a repo or already had a project in it, and it didn't like that. So I would suggest just going out, creating a fresh folder for this project only, and then doing create React app inside of that folder, that's just totally fresh and clean. I don't know how everybody else does it. How does everybody else organize their projects? Because I create a new folder for every single project, which means I have a crap ton of folders, but it works pretty well. I know some folks have way more organized, schemes of keeping things, remembering where things are, but all mine are just a bunch of folders. Share your organizational tips. All right, so we've installed our package. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Dan. And when in doubt, just create a brand new folder. Ah, okay. You have a Mayan Wolf folder. I'm honored. All right. Yep, fresh folder for every project. Absolutely. You could put it inside of another folder, but always fresh folder. Mayan folder is huge. Right, you. Does that mean you save everything to your desktop? I gotta admit, I never look at my desktop. As you can probably tell, I just use the default Windows 11. I've had this computer for like over a year, and I've never changed the desktop background because I never look at it. So yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, Raichu saves everything to their desktop. Um, Interesting choice. I like it. It's bold. It's innovative. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so we've installed our dependency. Now, really, so next thing let's go ahead and do is let's create our connection to Superbase. So we installed our Superbase package. So let's go ahead and create our connection to Superbase. And actually, first thing I'm going to do before we do that, I'm going to get rid of all this extra stuff because it's bothering me. So we're going to get rid of everything in the public folder except for index.html. Okay, everything in the public folder except for index.html. So anything in here, we'll get rid. All right, all gone. And we can also get rid of the bottom three things here. So setup tests, report web vitals, logo SVG, get rid of those. And we can also get rid of our app.css and app.test.js. All right, so that really only leaves us with app.js, index.css, index.js, and git ignore. Okay? Let's get rid of node modules. Yeah, don't do that. Don't listen to this person. By the way, Raichu, welcome to the stream. It's good to have you here. All right, and now inside of index.js, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to get rid of this whole section down here at the bottom. This is just a thing for web vitals. You don't need it. So we do that, get rid of all those things, and also get rid of the import statement up here. If you're not sure what to delete, go ahead and look at the repo. And if you go into index.js, you'll see essentially this. So if you're not sure, did I delete the right things? Look at the repo in GitHub. And you can click into any of those files in the repo in GitHub and see what's in there and make sure it looks like yours. Sit on a throne of lies. Hi, Noah. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you. All right. So now we've cleaned things up a little bit. I'm feeling better. Now we can actually start adding some things that we actually need. All right. So let's go ahead and build our connection to Supabase. So just like if you were connecting to MongoDB, if you were building an app with MongoDB, you would need to at some point bring in your connection string, right? And you would have a little function that essentially connects you. So thank you for the follow, Noah. Thank you for the follow, Greece. We need .env. Yes, we're going to be adding one of those in just a second. So, but in general, the way you connect to Supabase is just like you would connect to MongoDB. You'll have your secret variables that are going to be stored in a .env file, and you will have a function that establishes that connection. Okay, so let's go ahead and first we'll create our .env file where we put our secrets. So you're going to want to do that at the root of your project. So at the root of your project, inside of at the same level as, let's say, your README here, you can just say new file. It's going to be .env. Now you'll notice that I didn't do npm install .env, right? I didn't install that package. You don't need to. With React, you don't need to. So React can handle environment variables natively, which is kind of cool. You don't need to install anything else. React already knows how to handle them. So all you need to do is create your .env file. And inside of your .env file, I'm going to pull up my finished version here on my other screen so that I get this right. So inside of your .env file, you're going to add two things. You're going to add your Supabase URL and you're going to add your API key. So the variables that I'm going to be using are these two. This is where you put your URL followed by your API key. Okay. Now, if you're using environment variables in React, they have to begin with React _app_. Okay. And I even put a note about that in the README in the repo, is that if you want React to recognize your environment variables, they have to start with React _app_. And then after that, you can call them whatever you want. So I've called mine Supabase URL, Supabase API key. If you don't start them with React _app_, React won't know what they are. Thank you for the follow, Noah and Katie. Katya Teramoto. Thank you for the follows, guys. I hope you're having a good time. All right. Yes, and this is technically a public key, although I think it still belongs inside of an environment variable just because it's a connection that you don't necessarily want to broadcast to the world, right? Okay, so now let's go to let's go back to Supabase, and you're going to grab those two things that we talked about before. You're going to grab your project URL, and you're going to grab your API key, this first one here, a non-public. So we can copy this. I'm going to copy the URL, and I'm going to copy my anonymous key just by clicking that copy button there. And I'm going to drop that in there. So don't steal my stuff. I'm showing this to you because I want you guys to see how to do it. So don't steal my stuff, please. Thank you. Lieutenant Wheels. I love that name. Thank you for the follow. All right, so make sure you save that. And now that you've saved this, we can use these environment variables elsewhere in our app. So now we've done that. We are going to create another file. That's true. They can't perform. So nice thing about this is that this public key does not allow you to, do funky stuff with the data in my database, because you can set, security options and that kind of thing at the database level with Superbase, which is nice. But still, don't steal my stuff in general. Hey, Lieutenant Wheels. I'm doing well. I hope you are as well. All right. The public key looks like my password. All right, so now we're going to go into our source folder. So I'm hopping levels here a little bit. All right, so pay attention. This is easy to get mixed up with, and I've seen it happen, and I've done it before too. You put something at the wrong level, right? So your .env file goes at the same level as like your get ignore and your readme. So these things are all at the same level. Now we're going to add a file within our source folder. Okay, so click on source and then say new file. And in there, we're going to create a new file for our actual connection function, where we're actually going to establish that connection. All right, so we're going to call this one Supabase client.js. And that's where our actual connection function is going to live, which is going to establish that connection with Superbase. Lieutenant Wheels says, what kind of CRUD stuff are we doing? Well, we are learning how to use Supabase as a backend for a CRUD app. So most of the folks who are watching this stream have only ever used MongoDB or document-based database as a backend for apps. But today I'm demonstrating how to use a relational database as your backend. The cruddiest of CRUD, yes. All right. So Superbase client, it's very simple to establish a connection to Superbase. Super simple, Superbase. So all we need to do is say import. So we're going to import the ability to create a client. So create client. And if I click on that, it gave me the option. I clicked on it and it automatically filled that in for me. So we're importing create client. And we're just going to create a variable here called Supabase. Supabase. Called Supabase equals create client. Oops. Come on. Create client. There we go. And the only two arguments that this requires are our two things that we put inside of our env. So our URL, we say process.env, right, to access an environment variable. Process.env URL, and then process.env API key. There we go. And that's all we need to do. Now, last thing in order for us to actually use this function in other places, what else do I need to do here? What thing do I always forget? Oh my goodness, Dan can code. Thank you so much for the gifted subs. My goodness. I didn't see that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all your support. Thank you. And if you just got a free gifted sub from Dan Can Code, please do thank them. You also now have access to some pretty slick emotes that are only for subscribers to my channel, so enjoy those as well. John Coco Grandma, they're demonstrating one of the unique emotes. Yes, so the last thing I need to do here is just export this. Oop, and it added an extra create statement there for no particular reason. But yeah, you only need the one. You only need this one here. And then Supabase, and then we export this so we can use it in other places. Export Supabase. There we go. Ray Anthony, thank you so much for subscribing. My goodness, thank you. I really appreciate that, Ray Anthony. I hope you're having a good day. Thank you for the follow, Lock91 as well. For some reason, I'm not getting any audio alerts when people are following or subscribing, so I apologize if I failed to acknowledge anybody. My volume's up, but I can't. I'm not getting any alerts, so I apologize. But I'm looking at my chat feed, so I can see them there. All right. So this is our connection string. That's all we need to do. We'll go ahead and save that. And now, after that, we're really going to start building the meat of our application itself. Sun damage and affects the ears. Yeah, it's not that bad. Oh, thank you, Dan. Folks interested in SQL and databases are awesome. I think SQL and databases are awesome. They're so cool. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into app.js and actually start building the visual part of our app. So including our interactions with the database. So this is where we're going to build the functions that are going to talk back and forth to the database. So we'll get the chance to see, okay, if I have a SQL, relational SQL backend, but I'm writing my app in React, which is essentially JavaScript. It's just JavaScript with a pretty hat. So if I'm essentially writing my app in JavaScript, how do I talk SQL to a relational database using JavaScript? And so that's what we're going to learn how to do coming up next. Now that we've created our connection function, we're going to start to learn, okay, how do I translate JavaScript into SQL and vice versa? It's not too bad. But first, how we're going to do it is I'm going to build out the functions, basically all the CRUD functions. We're going to think about how we would write them in SQL, and then I'll show you how we then turn that into JavaScript. Yes, exactly. React is JavaScript with a really floofy, like Kentucky Derby style hat. That's all it is. And I've recently started working with Next.js too, which is essentially it's React wearing an even more ostentatious hat. So it's like JavaScript with two hats. Next.js is JavaScript with two hats on top of each other. Yeah, that's how I like to think of it. All right. However, it is time for a break, but please stick around because when we come back, we're actually going to start getting into what we came here for, right? Which is how do I build this app that can talk to a SQL database using React or JavaScript or whatever. Next.js app directory is like 7 hats, but some are server hats and some are client hats, but they're all shuffled together. Exactly. Yes. All right. So if you're new to the stream, we take 5 minutes at the top of each hour, or we try to anyway, and just take a little break, go get yourself a drink of water, use the restroom, whatever you need to do, and then we'll come back and we will get back to building. Okay. But during the break, feel free to ask questions. And if anybody asks a question during the break, I will get to it as soon as we get back. Myself, I'm going to get some more water because I am thirsty. All right. 5-minute timer. Reset that there. Get 3 seconds back. All right. Timer is rolling. I'll see y'all back here in 5 minutes, and we are going to start building our app. By the way, Zena, did you ever get things working? Were you able to create a new folder and do create React app and get it going? Let me know. All right. See you shortly. Okay, folks, we got about a minute left in the break. So come on back when you're ready. Also, I just realized that I think my schedule on my Twitch channel is set wrong. It still shows this stream is starting at 5 p.m. Eastern instead of 3 p.m. So, oops. Uh, if you're watching this VOD because you expected the stream to start 2 hours later than it actually did, my apologies. Please enjoy the VOD. Also, great to see you there, Kiro. Yeah, go to bed, get some sleep, watch the VOD. It's all good. I will get my schedule changed back to the proper start time on my Twitch channel as well. So sorry about that. See you fellas in 2 hours. Yeah, I'm expecting some folks to pop on at like 5 p.m. Eastern and being like, what? Sorry. Unicorn Jenny, thank you for the follow.
Jenny just followed.
Also, are you guys getting audio? Oh, yeah, it's the stupid timer thing. Sorry. I still can't hear it, but my bad. You hear a beep. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. I normally turn that off, but like I said, that my audio isn't working, so I didn't hear it. So my bad. Hope it woke you up. If anybody was asleep, I'm sure that woke them up. Cookies are done. There you go. Gosh, I wish I had cookies right now. Okay, let's get back to it. So, yeah, I could see the little like audio icon like bouncing, and I was like, "What is playing?" Costa, good to see you there, Costa. All right. So before the break, we built our connection for Supabase, right? We built our connection function for Superbase. And now what we're going to do is actually build out the app itself. And we're going to be referencing this connection when we go to, essentially just grab the data for the first time from the app. Sleep coding, done that before. Dedication. All right, so if we go into app.js, you'll notice that there's a bunch of stuff in here already. And so the first thing I want you to do is kill it with fire. So just do a control A or select all, whatever, and just delete it. We're going to completely replace everything in here with our own better stuff, right? Our own code. So clear out everything from app.js. You don't need to worry about the CSS file. That's okay. So inside of app.js, we're going to build out a React function. And so if you're not familiar at all with React, modern React is function based. So you'll be writing functions just like you would in plain old JavaScript. So it's pretty intuitive, I would say. Like I said, React is really just JavaScript wearing a funny hat. It's just JavaScript with more functionality. And that extra functionality allows you to reload essentially or change specific parts of the page based on user interactions without reloading the entire page itself. So it only reacts to the part of the page that needs to be changed without reloading the entire page itself. And there's a lot that goes into that, but really that's the reason that React exists, is so that every time somebody interacts with something on the page, you don't have to reload the entire page every single time. And so for something like this to-do app, where we're going to be doing a lot of updating, changing, deleting, adding, a lot of CRUD operations, React is really a good choice for this, because you don't want to be reloading the page 60 times a minute, right? Instead, what we can do is only make changes when and where they're needed. Yeah, so that's why React exists. Fonachi, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. So first thing we need to do is import React. So we're going to say import React, and we're also going to import a couple of other things we're going to need, including use state and use effect, and those are going to come from React. Oops, from React. There we go. And then we're also going to import Supabase, because we need that to connect to Supabase. So import Supabase from This was the function we just created, right? So we're going to import it from Supabase client, just like that. There we go. And now we'll be able to use both of those things. As far as use state, use effect, if you don't know what those are, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just wearing a fun. Yeah, it really is. Exactly, frankly. It really is. It's just React is, people are scared of React. It's like, ooh, what is it? How do I use it? It's literally, it is JavaScript wearing a funny hat. That's all it is. All right. So we're going to create a function and we're going to call it app. And the reason I'm calling this function app is because this is literally our app. Our entire app is going to be inside of here. And so when our page renders, when somebody opens our app, inside of index.js, it's literally going to render our app. That's what's going to happen. So we have a function called app. When the page loads, it's going to render everything that's inside our app function on that page. So that's what's happening. All right, so we're gonna have, inside of here, we're gonna build out several things, but primarily it's gonna be the CRUD functions that we're going to use to interact with the database. So I'm just gonna build out the skeleton of those for now. We're gonna think about what we need to do. So looking at the finished app, I know I paused the database on this, which is probably not a smart move, but just looking at the finished version of the app, what are some things that we're going to need to be able to do? Just by looking at this, what are some things that you think we might need to be able to do that I might want to put into functions? What are some things that I might need to be able to do in this app? Yeah, we're going to need to be able to create new tasks, right? We're going to be able to need to add some tasks. Sure. What else? Change them. Yeah. Store them. Sure. Yep. The storing is going to be part of the adding. So the adding is going to be also writing it to the database. So we'll be adding it and writing it to the database. But you are correct. Yes, delete them. Exactly. Yes, that's another thing we're going to need to do. By the way, hi, Ian. I hope you're having a good day. Yes, and also Ian says, get a list of all the tasks. That's correct, right? So when somebody first loads the page or opens the app, the first thing it's going to need to do is display all the tasks. And so it's going to need to go out to the database and fetch all of them, right? Hi, Ian. Good to have you here. And yeah, another thing it might need to do is toggle the state, and by that we mean essentially just toggle these to be complete or not. So all this does is just puts a line through them or not. Create, read, update, delete. Yeah, yeah. And so thinking about that, we're going to need at least one function for all of those things, right? We're going to need at least one create, one read, one update, one delete. We're going to have a couple more for specific things, but in general, that's what we're going to be trying to do. So let's go ahead and skeletonize those. So the first thing I'm going to kind of just think about here is we're going to have something called fetch to-dos. Fetch to-dos. And that's going to be an async function. Because, well, I'm going to ask you guys, why is that an async function? Why am I specifying that this needs to be an async function? Just thinking about what it's doing. Why do I already know that this is going to need to be async? Async await. Yeah, exactly. We're going to need to wait on a response from something external. Exactly. We need to wait on a response for something external. And so whenever you're waiting on something that you can't control, like that's outside of your control, such as a database or an API or whatever, you're going to want to generally use async await or async functions to make sure that your app doesn't get ahead of itself and try to do too much before it gets the data that it needs. Yeah. And so just in general, if you're talking to something external, like a database or an API or whatever, something that's out of your control, you'll want to use async await. Yeah. All right. So that'll be one of them. And then we'll do a fetch to dos. And then we'll also do another one called add to do. Add. And we'll fill these in, but I'm just kind of, like I say, skeletonizing them out for now. And once again, this is going to be async. Most of these are going to be async just because, once again, we're talking to the database again to add this item. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're also going to have the ability to update. So this is going to be our update to do. This is also going to be async. And we're also going to have another specific one for just toggling completion. So I'm going to copy this structure and we'll say toggle completion, like that. And then finally, we'll have delete. Delete to do. All right. So those are going to be the functions that we're going to need. And inside of these functions, obviously we're going to be interacting with the database for each one. Frankly asks, what's the general timeout on an async task? I don't think there is one. Yeah, I agree with Dan. I don't believe that there is a specific timeout on asynchronous tasks, although do feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, as always. I don't know that there is a set timeout. I mean, your app can just hang forever, potentially. Yeah. Maybe I'm just impatient and I've never actually reached the timeout because if something's hanging, I kill it. That could be too. All right. So just thinking about, now let's think about what each of these functions need to do in terms of SQL. So if we're thinking, we're going to kind of do some active recall here, or spaced repetition, whatever. And think about if we were talking to the database in terms of SQL, how we would do each of these things. So for the first one, if essentially what I want to do here is just when somebody first loads the page, I want to return everything that is available to return, right? I want to get all the things that are stored in the database and show them to the user. So if I were to write this in SQL, how would I do it? Yeah, exactly. It would just be a select star. So I'm going to put this in here as a comment just to kind of demonstrate. Select star from to-dos. And I am going to add, let's say, okay, I want to get everything from the database, but I want to make sure that they're always in the same order. So if I wanted to make sure that they were always in a certain order, what else could I add on to this select star in order to make sure that, because the way SQL works is that if you just do a select star, the records could potentially come back in a different order every single time. It doesn't, by default, it doesn't care what order it retrieves things in. And so if you just do a select star, it's going to mix things around. So if I wanted them to always be in the same order, what would I do? Yeah, exactly. I would need to add an order by clause. So I would say something like order by, and I'm just going to say order by ID. And I'm going to specify ascending here. I don't have to, but I'm going to. So select star from to-dos, order by ID ascending. So that's how I'd write that if I was writing it in pure SQL. Now, obviously, we are working in JavaScript here, or React. So I can't use pure SQL here, but I'm going to leave this comment so I can show you all how similar the JavaScript we're going to be writing, how similar it is to this simple SQL statement. All right. So let's build out this function to actually do the fetch. Hey, Hornswoggle. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. All right, so now we can do our fetch. So I'm going to say const. We're going to be getting, we could potentially get two things back from this. We could get some data, or we could get an error. So two potential things we could possibly get back. So const data or error, and I'm going to say await, and I can connect to Supabase using my connection function that I already created. So I can say await Supabase, And then I'm going to say from to-dos. So from the to-dos table, select, nope, sorry, dot select. And you see it's filling it in for me. Select star. Yeah, exactly. So from to-dos, select star, and then I can say order by ID. And I'm not sure if this is necessary or not, but we can just say ascending, true. All right. So now if we compare this to the SQL query up here, select star from to-dos order by ID ascending, we're essentially doing the same thing, just in a slightly different order. So I'm saying from to-dos, select star, order by ID ascending, right? So exactly the same. That's all you need to do. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Hornswoggle. Dan says, no code completion on the columns. The Supabase client doesn't know which columns you've added. No code completion on the columns. I'm not sure I understand the question. Feel free to maybe phrase that in another way, or if somebody else understands, feel free to clarify for me. But I'm just not sure I fully understand what you're asking there as far as code completion. Wiki Vase, thank you for the follow. No code completion. No columns. Yeah, I'm still not. I'm not quite getting it. Sorry, it's not you. It's me. I'm not following the question. Oh, Icefire says star is all columns from the table. Yes, that's correct. Yes. So it's basically what it's going to do is it's going to go out to the to-dos table, and it's going to return all possible rows and columns that it finds. So it's like all. If you were to say something like select all, that's what this is doing. Select star is what we call a wildcard, and it basically means give me everything. So select star is a shorthand for everything. Give me all the rows, all the columns from that table. Oh yeah. So you can, and you could also, look for individual columns if you wanted to. And sometimes you may want to. Sometimes you're only going to want certain columns from your table, in which case you can specify that as well. In this case, however, we're really only going to want, we're going to want everything, right? We don't want to be, picky at all. So we can just do select star. But yes, just like with a regular SQL query, you could choose individual columns as well. So for example, you could do, I don't remember what my column names are, to be honest. We could do, so ID task and is completed. Okay, those are the choices. So you could do, like in SQL, you could do something like ID task is completed, and that would be the same thing as select star. So this is the same as this. The star is just a shorthand for give me everything. No, it's all good. Yeah, at this point, we don't have any kind of, we haven't established any kind of connection to the database. I see what you're asking now. Yeah, VS Code has no way of knowing what columns you have in your table. It doesn't know that. So yeah, there isn't going to be. I wouldn't expect there to be any auto completion here. I think if I did select, like, yeah, I could type these out, but yeah, it's not gonna do it automatically for me. All right. So, but as you can see, there's a clear relationship between what I've written here and what I would have written if I was just doing it in pure SQL. So it may be helpful for you, if you are slightly familiar with SQL, to write the SQL statement first and then figure out how to translate that into JavaScript. And that's what we're going to do for each of these. We're going to write the SQL statement first, and then we're going to translate it into what our app is actually expecting. So fetch to do's, actually, we need to add a little bit more to this fetch. So we wait that. we get the sending true. And then we're just going to add a little error catcher here. You could do a try catch if you wanted. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but we're going to say if error, and then we'll just do a console error. Console error. And I'm going to paste the message because I'm lazy. We'll just say error fetching to-dos and then the error message. Else, we'll say set to-dos and then put the data in there. All right, now you might be like, hey, wait a minute. What's set to-dos? What is that? We haven't done that yet. Where am I putting this data? So this is the data we're getting back from that select statement. So essentially we run the select, it puts it into this variable called data, and then we're passing this data variable into a function called set to-dos. And what this is referencing state, which is a pretty important cornerstone of React. This is something that doesn't exist in regular JavaScript. Remember, React is JavaScript wearing a funny hat. So this is part of the funny hat, is state. State doesn't exist in regular JavaScript. It lives in the funny hat that JavaScript wears when it becomes React. So it's like, I don't know, it's like the rabbit in the magician's hat. This is part of the rabbit, not the magician. Yeah. So this is coming from this use state hook that we imported up here. And what state is essentially it tells React when and where to update the UI. So state helps track changes. So when things change, such as say maybe this select statement returns another item, right? We've added another item and now suddenly there's one more thing on the list that we're getting back from the database. What's passed into this to-dos state is suddenly going to be different than what was there before. And that tells React, hey, I need to update the UI because there's something new here. And so state keeps track of changes, which then tells React to make changes to the UI and show the user something different. So they're like watchers. They're watching for changes in their little part of the world, in their little part of the code. And they're saying, hey, React, something's different now, please. We need to change something about the UI and show this to the user. Okay. This is poetry. It lives in the funny hat. What is state? Yeah, if that's how you want to remember it, yes, state lives in the funny hat that sits on top of JavaScript. So we do need to add something here up top, and we need to declare a few of those state variables, which are going to watch for these types of changes. So we've called something here that doesn't exist yet. So we do need to do a couple of declarations up top. But first, I wanted to introduce state and kind of like give folks a feeling of what it is before we actually start to declare these. So let's go ahead and set up a few of these watchers, a few of these trackers, which are going to be tracking changes and telling React when to update our UI. And I'm going to go through the first one here. Actually, I'm going to write out a couple of them, and then we'll talk about why they look like this. So first one is the one that I just called, which is set to dos. And you might be like, this looks weird, but don't worry, I'll talk through it. State, and then we'll do one more here. We'll do the one that's going to track new tasks. So this is going to identify when a new task is created. New task, set new task, and then we'll call use state begin. All right, so let's look at these. They look similar, but slightly different, right? But they follow a similar structure. We can see there's a certain structure to these. So whenever you declare a state variable, whenever you're setting up one of these watchers that's watching for changes in the data, it follows a very specific structure, which tells React that, hey, this is a variable, but it's a special variable. It's a state variable. So what we're doing here is we're declaring it just like we would a normal variable. And we set the variable name, which is to-dos. But the second thing we set here is the function which updates this variable. So that's what I'm calling here, right? I'm calling the set to-dos function, which will in turn update the to-dos variable. So whenever I declare a new state variable, I'm declaring two things: the variable itself and the function that updates it. And to the right of the equal sign, I'm just telling React, hey, all this stuff here, this is a state variable, so it needs to use state. And by default, so when the app first loads, this is going to be an empty array. When the app first loads, before it hits the database at all, it's going to start out as an empty array. It's going to go to the database. It's going to grab everything, and it's going to be a populated array, right? After it hits the database. But when this variable is first initialized, it should always be an empty array, which is then going to be populated with the data that I get back from my select statement. Now, similar for new task, and we'll get there. We'll see how this function works once I write it. But for new task, it's going to be similar. Variable is called new task. The function that updates it is called set new task. It's a state variable. And by default, before I start typing in the box to create a new task, it's going to be an empty string. And then as soon as I start typing, it's going to get populated and be a populated string. Okay? All right. So you don't have to, I don't expect you to be super familiar with state after that little explanation, but I hope it makes it slightly less opaque and why we write state variables this way. And as we get this more filled out, hopefully I can give you some demonstrations on what these individual pieces of state are doing and why they exist. All right, so Dev recently told me that use state is your getters and setters for interview Q&A. Yes, if you're familiar with getters and setters, there you go. You can think of them that way. I like to think, I'm not super familiar. I was never super familiar with getters and setters. So I just like to think of them as sort of like, alerts or flags, or, they're, you're setting up certain monitoring points or listening stations or spy stations, satellites, whatever you want to think of them. And they're just, all they do is watch. They watch their little assigned, portion of Earth or portion of the code, and they watch for those specific changes. And if anything changes there, then that tells React, make an update. All right, so that's what we're doing there. Yes, the key point of state is on change. It will trigger a UI update. Yes. So if you think about something like a spy satellite, these are all different. These are different spy satellites, and they're orbiting over different parts of the Earth. They're watching their assigned part of the Earth. As soon as they see something like a plane taking off, then they send an alert down to military headquarters, and they say, "Hey, do something, make a change, do something. Something is happening." That's essentially what state is doing. It's watching for changes to trigger a UI update. Hey, Alex. Good to see you here. All right. And the next thing I want to add up here too, we're going to add a couple additional state variables, but we'll get there when we get there. Next thing I want to add here too is use effect. And I'll tell you what this is after I've added it. Fetch to-dos. And use effect is kind of complicated, but in this case, really all it's doing is just saying, hey, when the first time the page loads, immediately call fetch to-dos. So essentially this is kind of just saying, hey, when somebody opens the app, first thing it should do is call fetch to-dos and fetch all the to-dos, right? To display them as soon as the app opens. So the user doesn't have to interact with the app at all. Just on page load, fetch to-dos will be called, the to-dos will be brought down, and they'll be written into the UI. So don't worry too much about this. Use effect is pretty complicated, but in this case, this is all it's doing, is just calling fetch to-dos as soon as the page loads. All right, now let's look at add to-dos. All right, so let's think about SQL again. Remember, we wrote our fetch in SQL first, and then we wrote it out in JavaScript. So if I wanted to, this is a little bit harder. So if you were on my SQL stream a couple weeks ago, you might know the answer to this. But if I were to add, if I wanted to add a record into my to-dos table, what would I need to do? What keyword would I use? I'm not going to ask you to write the whole statement, but what keywords would I use if I wanted to add a record into my to-dos table? Thinking in terms of SQL. Oh, wow, you guys are quick. Y'all are quick. Yes, we're going to be inserting into. Exactly. Insert into. All caps. Insert. Yeah. I see you're a fan of traditional SQL with the all caps. I like it. I dig it. Insert into to-dos. Yep, exactly. And insert into to-dos, and we can just say values. It's going to be new task and false. So what this is essentially going to be doing is it's going to write into our table, and it's going to write the text of the task, and is completed as false. We're going to want to have those be false by default. You could always set this up to, you could set this column up to have a false value by default if you wanted. So if nothing was written to the row, it would put that value as false by default. But for our purposes, we'll just write it in as false ourselves. No, but you can. So you don't necessarily have to specify the column names. You don't necessarily have to specify the column names, but you can. If you're writing to all the columns at once, then you don't. But I will admit that I normally do. So you can say, you'd essentially do this. Task is completed, values, new task false. So if you were writing this, and this is actually what I normally do when I write insert statements at work, just because it's clearer, is I will always specify insert into to-do. So this is the table I'm inserting into. These are the columns that I'm going to be inserting values into. And then these are the actual values themselves, new task and false. Where new task is going to be the variable holding the text. So it's going to be a string of some kind, walk the dog, wash the dishes, whatever. So that's how that would look in SQL. Crazy Monkey says, is there a transaction? We're actually going to be writing this. So this SQL is not going to be executed. I'm just showing how to write this, how you would write this if you were writing plain SQL. But we're going to be writing it using JavaScript. So that's what I'm just about to show. So similar to the first one, we can say const data error, and we're going to await Supabase. And the first thing we're going to say is from to-dos, just like before, we're telling Supabase which table we're talking to. And then we just say insert. Oops, dot insert, I apologize. Because we're chaining methods here. Dot insert. Task. New task. And is completed. Oh, is completed. There we go. I cannot spell for the life of me. Good Lord. Is completed is false. All right, so this is going to insert this value. So from to-dos, insert, and then we pass in the information that we're actually inserting. We pass that in as an object, right? Because in JavaScript, everything is an object. And so we need to translate this kind of fragmented, insert statement where we have the columns first and then the values. We need to translate that into something that JavaScript understands. And so in order to do that, we just put them in our good friend, an object with the key value pairs, where this is the column, this is the value, this is the column, and this is the value. Okay? So I hope you can see how these two kind of translate into each other. Once again, similar keywords, similar phrasing, just a slightly different order and structure to match what JavaScript actually understands and knows how to do. All right? Now, after I insert these, so okay, let's think about this in terms of how the app will actually work. So I've inserted my new record. Now, essentially what I want to do is I want to immediately retrieve the updated list of records with my new record included. So how might I do that? What do you think? No wrong answers here. If I was doing it in SQL, what would I do? I've inserted. Let's think about it, if I was interacting with the database with SQL. I've inserted a new record. Now I want to see what my table looks like. Yeah, Icefire says we could potentially call fetch to dos, right? We have a function which does the select already. Sure. Yeah, if we were doing it in SQL, we would do a select star, right? We would do another select star from to dos, right? Now, a nifty thing about the way Supabase works is that since Superbase already knows what table we're talking to, we can simply chain another method onto the end of this and say dot select. And essentially, all that's going to do is just turn right back around and select the row that we just inserted. So rather than having to call fetch to dos again, dark magic. Yeah, exactly. Rather than having to call fetch to dos again and get everything, because we're already storing all that data locally, we're already storing it in a variable locally right here in our app. So I don't necessarily want to fetch the whole thing again when I've just inserted it and I really only need the new fresh record. So I can just say from to dos, insert, and then immediately turn around and select that row again, and we'll add it into our existing state variable. Yeah. So it's kind of nifty, right? I like it. And doing it this way is more convenient than it actually is. It's quicker than writing it in pure SQL, because in pure SQL, I would have to then turn around and do a select on like the max ID value to find the record I just inserted. So I would have to like figure out which record I just inserted and then do a select on that in order to retrieve that record. So this is actually much faster, which is cool. All right, so we did that, and now we'll just add our little if error statement here. So I'm going to copy that after my select. So if error, we'll do our console error dot error, whatever. Now in the else here, this time I'm actually going to be, I want to update our set to dos variable. So I want to update our to dos variable with just the one new record that I just inserted. So I have all the other records previously already in there. I'm going to update just this one. So in order to do that, I am going to need one more state variable. Actually, wait, no, I won't. Never mind. Sorry. Hang on one second. I lost my place in my, I got lost in the sauce in my finished version. All right, here we go. So I can just call set to dos again. So we already have the state variable we need. Never mind. And I can just do this. All right. And all this is doing is it's just taking everything that was already in our to-dos state variable. It's using the spread operator to spread it out across an array. And it's adding the new item that we just inserted. So this looks a little funky. It's just a little shorthand. All it's doing is it's saying it's taking all the to-dos that were already in there. It's spreading them out using the spread operator. Dot 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 is the spread operator. It takes a group of values and splits them out, and it's adding on the new value that we just retrieved from this insert and select. Oops, and I put it in the wrong place. Gosh dang it. Sorry. Back that out. So it needs to go down here in the insert. My apologies. There we go. Right here. So add to do. We're taking the previous to-dos, everything that was already in there inside of our state variable, spreading it out, and then adding the new item. And now all that is going to be stored back in our state variable. So all, in simple terms, all we're really doing here is we're adding this new record into our state variable. That's all it is. Yeah, in this case, I think it's going to be fine because it's because what we're doing. So if you think about Dan, if you think about the ordering, in our fetch, we're ordering by ID ascending, right? So always low values at top, larger values at bottom. And now here in our state, we're just adding the record to the end of the state, and so it should be fine. We should match both ways, but we're going to call fetch again on some of the other functions. We're just going to be calling fetch again. So we're going to see, you're actually going to get to see it both ways. So you get to see both options. This is the fancier option where we actually just take our values that are stored locally and update that state. But for some of the others, we're just going to be calling fetch to dos again. So you'll get to see both. All right, and then the last thing we want to do here is we want to make sure that since we've added a new task here, the user was typing inside of the box, our insert task box, right? They were typing inside of this right here. And so the last thing we want to do in this function is just make sure we clear out that box. That box should be empty so that the user doesn't have to see the old task that they were already typing. So that'll reset that and set that state variable to an empty string. Yeah. Okay. So next, I think let's look at. Oh, so where does prev to dos come from? You can think of this as sort of like a parameter, like a function parameter. So you can call this whatever you want. Essentially, what we're doing here is we're kind of making like we're making like I don't know if you call this like an anonymous function, but you can see that if I hover over it, it's flagged as a parameter. And so when you're building a function, you can call parameters whatever you want, and you can reference them inside the function, but they don't exist anywhere else. So prev to dos, you can think of it as a function parameter, and what that contains is essentially just everything that is inside of the state variable. So it's a little complicated to think about, but essentially this is just a function parameter. What gets passed in here is all the values that are currently in our state variable, so the whole list of existing to-dos, and those to-dos get spread apart, and then our new one gets added on to the end. All right. Crazy Monkey says, how do the drivers work with Superbase? Are they written in JavaScript? Are you talking about this stuff right here? Yes, we're writing. So we're writing in JavaScript here. That's correct. We're writing in JavaScript. Technically, it's React, but again, JavaScript with a funny hat. It's JavaScript at its core. We're writing in JavaScript here, and yes, and that gets translated by the Supabase dependency that we installed, the Superbase package that we installed. Superbase can then translate that into essentially SQL, which is what I've written up here. This is how you would write this in SQL. Renate says, I think I get it. Awesome. And if you don't get it, that's okay. It's all right not to get it. It's perfectly fine. At any point, you're allowed to say, I don't know, or I don't understand. And, sometimes it's a process, right? So feel free if anybody's, if this question, if a question about this is really bothering you, you're not getting something, you're like, why is this happening? Why are you doing it like this? Feel free to ask. It's okay to ask. Line 35. Okay. Drunk says, is the semicolon necessary here, just like the end of a SQL statement? No. I mean, technically, I should be better at putting semicolons. You don't have to have it, but as far as I know, it's not necessary. If we were writing pure SQL and you had multiple statements, you would have to put a semicolon at the end. But we all know JavaScript ain't strict like that, right? JavaScript don't care. JavaScript don't care what you do. That's why I love it. Yeah, and Dan summed it up really nicely there for you. Frankly, it's a more wordy way of writing that. And I'm actually going to copy this and drop it in so you can see the difference. So we could also write it as such. A slightly wordier way of doing that would be like writing it as a more traditional function. So this is essentially writing it as an anonymous arrow function. This would be writing it as a full function, which might make it actually clear. And I can even format this um, to look more like a function. All right, let's do this. Let's see, return. There. So if I wanted to write this out fully, it would look like that. Function prev to dos is the parameter. We return all the previous to dos spread out across an array plus the new one that we just created. Yeah, JavaScript don't care. Yeah, exactly. So what this is essentially just a streamlined shorthand version of that. Yeah, as an arrow in arrow function form. Mibanachi, thank you for the follow. Oh, and Winky Face, sorry if I forgot to thank you for the follow. I don't remember. Yeah, I think what might be confusing is that it's all wrapped in this set to dos thing, but really it's just a function that takes in the existing values that were already in there, that were already stored in the to dos variable, the list of existing values, takes those in, and then appends the new one that we just created, appends that to the end of the list, just adding one to the array. Yeah. All right. And then clearing the input box. Save that. All right, now let's look at update. Appends, yes, indeed. Oh, thank you, Crazy Monkey. I appreciate that. All right, so update statements. Does anybody remember how to write an update statement in SQL? How do we do that? So, and to give you some more context, what we're doing here is essentially if a user double clicks on a specific item in the list, it will open up the edit window. So like it'll open up the input box and then they can, make an edit to it and then they can click away and it will save that. It will save that edit to the database. So let's say I wanted to write the SQL to update a single task to specific text and I only want to update that one task. So if I want to make sure that I'm updating a unique task, what might that in my to-dos table, what might that SQL statement look like? Drunko Grammar says, been doing SQL Code Wars daily. Nice. Yeah, so we're going to want to use the update keyword, right? And we say update to-dos. We're updating something in the to-dos tables. And yes, and then we use the set keyword. So this tells SQL that we are setting a value. We're making a change to a particular value. And I'm going to say set task because let's think about what we're doing here. We are inside of our table. We're updating this specific column. So we're saying update the to-dos table, set the value of the task column, update to-dos, set task equals, and then we're going to have a variable called editing text. There, you can't know that, so I'm going to fill that in. Editing text. Now, if I want to make sure that I'm only updating one singular row in that column, because if I just ran this, if I just said update to do set task equals editing text, that's going to update everything in the column. All the rows are going to suddenly be updated to have the same text. So don't do that. I've done that in a real table. Don't do that. It's bad. You always, what do you always want to have in an update statement? What should always come next after you're set? Just in general, after you say, in an update statement, after you say set whatever, yes, you always need, exactly, as some of y'all were saying, you always need a where clause. You always never run a wide open update statement. It's going to get you in trouble. Most clients will actually warn you about that. They will say, oh my God, what are you doing, you idiot? And so if you just run a wide open update, a lot of clients will even give you a warning. So you always want a where statement. You always want a where. And in this case, we're going to say, if I want to identify, make sure that I'm always identifying a unique row. in my table, what column should I use as the for in my where statement? What column should I use? Yes, exactly. The correct answer is ID because that is the unique ID. It's literally going to increment for every single row that we add. It's always going to be unique. So yes, I always want to use ID. I'm just going to say where ID equals ID because we're going to have an ID value, and that's what we're going to be using. So this is how my SQL would look in a sort of a rough way. Yeah. All right. So const. This time we're just going to have one potential return here. It's just going to be error, const error, and we'll say await Supabase, just like we did before. Await Supabase, and once again, we'll say from to-dos. You'll start to see a pattern here. First, we identify what table we're talking to, and then we can use our update keyword, just like we did here in our raw SQL statement, update. We say update, and then task, and we set task to editing text. This is going to be another state variable we're going to set up. It's basically all this is going to hold is the if somebody double clicks on an item to edit it, this is going to hold that text that they're changing. And then if I want to say, so we've essentially done this, right? We've done update to dos, and then we're saying what we want that value to be set to, update task equals editing text. And then how I do my where clause is I essentially just say EQ. And this is shorthand for just equals. So I can say where ID is equal to whatever ID I'm passing in. So this part looks a little different, but essentially this is the where clause. We're saying where ID equals ID by saying EQ. And then once again, we want to console log any errors. That. And then we'll say else. I just realized in the original version, I didn't structure my my else statement very well, but that's all right. Now for this one, we're just going to call fetch to-dos again, which is just going to go out and it's going to grab the whole list of everything again, making sure that it gets all the updates. We are going to reset editing ID to null. Essentially, this is just saying, all right, nobody's editing anything anymore. They have submitted the item that they wanted to change. It's done. We're just resetting all the state variables back to their original default values. Okay, I think that should do it. Else fetch to dos, grab everything again, reset the state variables back to the beginning. And Dan says, I'm not sure that I like they dropped the where word in their SDK's API. Yeah, it's a little weird not to have a where clause in there. And maybe there's a way to write it with a where clause, like explicitly. That could be a thing. I should look at that and see if there's a way to do it like that. It could be that the Supabase documentation is really pretty good. If you're ever wondering how to do something, they literally have examples of CRUD statements like in their documentation that you can just copy and paste. So if you want to if you're not sure how to do a CRUD operation, they have examples that are ready to copy and paste in their documentation. Yeah, and EQ here literally does stand for equals. So the where is kind of implied, but yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, error. You're correct. Error updating to do. That's correct. Good catch. All right. And so you can see here we're calling on a couple of state variables that we don't have yet. So let's go ahead and set those up. There's only a couple of them. So we previously said, new task, set new task. And let's see, we say we need const editing ID, and set editing ID. That'll be use state. And this will start out as null because by default, nobody's going to be editing anything. So there shouldn't be anything in there. And then const editing text, editing ID, editing text. And then we'll say set editing text. And that will just be an empty string. All right, and those are all the state variables that we're going to need. So we won't have to set up anymore. All right, so so now we're tracking the actual list of to-dos. We're tracking if somebody's typing in the new task box, we're tracking what's being typed there. We are also tracking the ID of the item that's being edited. So which item did they click on to edit? That matters, right? Because we need to know which one to update in the database. And then we're also tracking, and also we also need to know which ID to turn into a box that they can type in. So if they double click on the item, it's going to convert that into a box that they can actually type in. So we need to know which ID they're editing. And then the text is what actually they typed in that box, to like what change did they make? Did they remove a letter? Did they type something completely different? We don't know. So we need to track that. So these are the 4 things we're tracking. All right. Oops. Save that. Oh, thank you, Panel Gene 61. Thank you. Crypto says it's a little inconsistent that EQ statement is not the same format of EQ ID equals editing ID. Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before. I guess so. And like I say, it could be that it could be that you can write all these things explicitly, and make them more equitable, I guess, in the way that they're written. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Yeah, I hadn't thought about this specific thing here, how different these are. I'm thinking the reason why, and I could be wrong. I'm thinking the reason why is that here you're passing an object, right? And an object could contain multiple key value pairs because you could be updating multiple columns at once. You could be updating 100 columns at once, and each one of them is going to have a key value pair. So you want to pass in an object. However, in this equal statement, you're always only going to have one thing on the left side of the equal sign and one thing on the right side of the equal sign. It's always going to be a one-to-one relationship. So this doesn't need to be an object because it's literally always one-to-one. Whereas this could be an object containing, 100 different key value pairs. All right. So that's my thought as to why that is the way it is. Am I saying I'm right? I don't know. That's just the first thing I thought of. Lunch with me. Welcome to the stream. Seeing it used on the front end as a fetch. So that means Supabase can act as a backend. Superbase can act as a backend API, so no setting up backend was needed for this project. Yeah, so we don't have we don't have a server. We don't have a server for this particular project. We did have to set up a table first inside of Superbase. We did have to set up a table inside of Superbase. And we had to set up the structure first before we could start writing to it and things like that. So that's what we did first. So there's if you're talking about backend, this is, but we don't have to have it. We don't have a server for this particular project, because we're working with React, so it can handle it. Scripta says aware and SQL can have multiple conditions. Yes, that's correct. But in this specific case, we don't need to, in this specific case, when we're talking about in equals, you can't have multiple things on one side of the equal sign and multiple things on the other side of the same equal sign. You'd have to have multiple equals conditions. Yeah. Yeah, and we don't need to use app.listen or express or anything like that because we're using React. Yeah, so we don't need to do all that extra setup. React can do that for us. So for example, if I were to type npm run, if you set up a fresh React project without doing anything, if you just do create React app and set up a completely fresh product, you can just do npm run right out of the gate, and you will have your project will will spin up on localhost 3000. So you don't need to set up your server, all that express listen, none of that stuff. Now, you can have, React projects that talk to APIs. You can have that middle ground and that kind of thing, but in this case, we don't need one. Okay. But the server's where all the fun stuff lives. Yeah, I can't say I disagree with you. All right. Oh, it's definitely break time. So we're going to take a break, but we're actually doing pretty well here. This toggle completion is going to be very similar to this previous one. So we'll be able to kind of copy a lot of this. We're going to be able to copy a lot of this. Um, and then delete is going to be even simpler because, we're just blitzing a row. Just boop, delete. All right. So after we get these functions written out, then we'll actually build out what is going to be returned. So what is our user interface going to look like? How does it interact with all this, data we've been capturing and sending back and forth? And that's what's actually going to render out in the browser as our app. Icefire says, this is all making sense. Yay, yay. I'm happy for you, Icefire. Frankly says Firebase and Supabase are popular platforms that provide a range of tools for mobile and web developers. While Firebase offers a document-based data storage solution, Supabase stands out by leveraging the power of Postgres, a robust relational database management system. Yes, but there's also Firestore. So there's Firebase and Firestore. Firebase is document-based, which is correct. Firestore is, I believe, the relational version of that, and Supabase is actually like um, a clone of, I don't want to say clone, an alternative to Firestore. I think, am I right there? I always get Firestore and Firebase and Firestore mixed up. Am I wrong? Somebody Google it. Google, Google, Google. I'm too lazy to do it myself, so I'm being declarative when I'm telling chat to do it. Okay, so it's Firebase Firestore. Oh wait, that's why I get them mixed up. So Firebase is JSON NoSQL. Okay, that's what I was thinking. And then Firebase. Okay, Firebase Firestore. Firebase Dogbase. Okay, I did get them backwards. Ah, dang. All right. I always do that. I always get them backwards. All right, read what Frankly put in chat. Don't listen to me. I was thinking that there was a relational, specifically a relational version of that, but I guess I'm wrong. That's all right. Anyway, Supabase is at least Supabase is free, which is the good part. At least for 2 projects. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. It is break time, over break time actually. So feel free to feel free to research the differences between Supabase and Firebase on your during the break. But I highly suggest getting up, getting a drink of water, using the restroom, doing what you got to do, and coming back refreshed and ready to finish out the app. All right, we'll reset the timer, and I've muted the timer so it won't beep at you again. I apologize for that. Dan says, if you try to research the differences, be prepared for a headache. Yeah, that's what it comes down to with most of these things, right? I will say, I've found Supabase meets my needs. I haven't really felt the need to try other platforms at this point, but that's not to say it's going to be right all the time, right? So feel free to do your own research, but don't sweat too hard about it. Just more think about, do I need a document based solution or do I need a relational based solution for my app? And then pick whatever platform makes the most sense for you at the time. All right, 5 minutes. I'll see y'all back here shortly. Okay, folks, we got about a minute left in the break. Come on back when you're ready. Get yourself a drink of water. If you've been sitting down this entire time, be sure to stand up and take a stretch. I always make sure that, since I'm standing during my streams, I always go and sit down for a minute just to have a change of position. So I always go sit down, and if you've been sitting down, you should stand up if you're able to stand up, of course. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the timer. And webcam back on. There we go. All right. Now, before the break, we did a couple of the parts of CRUD, right? We did our read, which was our fetch. We did our add, which was our create. And we did one of our updates. Now we want to do one more update and then our delete to round out the whole CRUD experience. So all right, for toggling completion, what we're going to do is we are just going to, for this one, we're actually going to be passing in a couple values. So when somebody clicks on an item to toggle it on and off, we want to pass in the ID of the item that they clicked on and whether or not it's completed. Because when we toggle completion, it's essentially going to read the existing value of it. So whether that completion is true or false, and then it's going to make it the opposite. So I'm going to pass in the existing value and then toggle that on and off. And also too, in the previous function, so in our update to do, in this previous one here, we're also going to be passing in the ID value. So if you already wrote out this update to do function, don't forget that we also need to add ID here as a parameter that we're passing into it. So passing in the ID, and then that's what we're going to be using in our update. And for toggle completion, similarly, we're also passing in the unique ID value and also the status of whether or not it's completed. So once again, let's write this out in SQL first, and then we will translate that into JavaScript. So with the previous update statement in mind, can anybody give me what I might use for this particular statement here? How would I write this particular, if I want to toggle the completion of a particular item, how would I write that out as a SQL statement? You can use the previous update statement as a template. Okay, good start. We'll say update to-dos. I want to phone a friend. Set is completed. That's right. So when we're thinking about which column we want to be updating, we'll be updating the is completed column. And then we need to set that to set is completed. And we'll just set it to essentially not is completed. So whatever it was before, we're going to reverse that. So if it was true, it was false. It's now false. If it was false, it's now true, right? Just want to reverse that. So pretty simple. And also, as you can see, similar structure to the previous update. Set is completed. Yes. And then, yes, the next part of that, exactly, good, is where ID equals ID. Exactly. Yep. And actually, I think I have that wrong in the repo as well. I think if you look at the repo, at the statement in the repo, I think I forgot the where clause, which would be big trouble if you actually tried to run that against a real table. So, yep, y'all wrote a better SQL statement than I did. Good job. So now I'm going to be able to copy most of the body of this previous function and drop it in here. We'll just change what we need to change. All tasks are completed. Time to go home. Hey, I like the way you think. All right, so we'll say const error await Supabase from to-dos. We're going to update. Now we're going to change what we're updating, right? We're going to set is completed. And we're just going to set it to whatever the opposite of the previous value was. So set is completed to the opposite, and then where ID equals ID, and if error, console log the error, and then else, the only thing we need to do here is just fetch to-dos. Because the reason we don't need to change it in the other state variables is that we're just clicking a button. So nothing else in the state was being tracked other than the completion value. All right, so that's all we need to do for this particular one. And then finally is the easiest one of all, which is delete. So once again, how do I write a delete statement in SQL? Delete statements look a little different, right? And the important thing to remember here is that when you write a delete statement in SQL, you are always deleting an entire row. You can't just go in and delete like one part of the row, like say like just the task text. You can't use a delete statement for that. A delete statement is always deleting an entire row. If you wanted to delete a singular column value within a row, you would have to use an update statement to do that. You would have to set the value to null. So that's an important sort of a fundamental thing to remember about SQL is that only use a delete statement when you want to delete an entire row at once. If you want to just delete a single part of a row or a couple parts of a row, you would need to use an update statement and set values to null. Very, very careful. Yes, exactly, Reneeds. Exactly. We were going to want to just simply say delete, oops, delete from to-dos where where ID equals ID, essentially. Yeah. And once again, into this one, we're also going to be passing in an ID value. So essentially, whatever ID, delete from to-dos where ID equals ID. And you'll notice I don't have to say like delete star from to-dos where ID equals to or whatever. I don't have to say, delete, I don't know, the column names or whatever. By its very nature, a delete statement is always going to delete an entire row, so I don't have to specify the columns. It's always deleting all the columns for that row or all the values for that row. All right. Drop table. That's one way to do it. You can also delete rows by dropping the entire table, although I don't normally suggest that. All right, so once again, we're going to say const error and await Supabase. And as before, from to-dos, all we have to do here is instead of, specifying, certain values or anything like that, we just say delete, boop, like that. And then the most important part is the EQ. And once again, we can just say ID where ID equals ID. Dan says, no way Superbase lets you do that in its client. I don't know. I imagine it probably lets you do pretty much, a lot of things, but I don't know if it would let you drop an entire table. Yeah. All right, and I'm going to copy the second part of this here. Just say, hey, if error, if error, and then we'll say error deleting to do. And then otherwise run the fetch. Icefire says, any verification, like, are you sure you want to delete? Yeah, so in Supabase, like in the actual client, if I'm running SQL in the actual like Supabase GUI in the web, if I did a delete from to-dos without specifying a where clause, so if I just did this part like that, if I did delete from to-dos with no where clause, it would give me an alert that said, hey, this is a destructive operation. Are you sure you want to do this? And actually, I'm trying to remember, it may even give me that if I run this statement as is like this. It gives an error saying, hey, you're about to do something destructive. Are you sure you want to do this? And most clients will do that. Most clients are pretty good about that, about trying to make sure that you're actually doing what you mean to do, especially when you try to run operations that are going to affect the entire table. And like, for example, at work, there have been times when I have actually run an update statement without a where clause on purpose. Like something needed to happen. I needed to update all the rows in a column to have the same value or have a specific value. And so I just had to run it with no where clause. It doesn't happen very often, but my client, my Oracle client gives me an error and says, "Hey, bro, are you sure?" And then you have to say yes, and it's always terrifying. Frankly says an interesting extension could be to make an import function to import multiple to do tasks um, from another list or app. Yeah, you can do that. And I mean, so also in Supabase, there's a functionality where you can, like, if you have a spreadsheet, you can upload that straight into your table. So you have the ability to take things like a CSV file or a spreadsheet or whatever and just pop it straight into Supabase if you want to pre-populate the data that you're storing in your database, inside of your Supabase database. If you have a spreadsheet or a CSV or whatever with that data in it already, you can just upload it straight in there. So that's a useful thing to be aware of as well. For example, if you're doing some, if you want to do some, let's say you have a spreadsheet and you want to do some analytics on it using SQL, and SQL is very good for analytics. It's the primary, so that and Python are two great things for data analysts to know, and SAS maybe as well. But if you want to do quick and dirty analytics using SQL, you could always take that spreadsheet data and pop it into Supabase and do SQL on it there. Nipsitas, thank you for the follow. Oracle client is infamous for its casual use of slang. Yeah, we all know that Oracle is like a super hip, youthful, hello fellow kids style company. Absolutely, that's what it's known for. I'm being sarcastic there if you couldn't tell.
Just followed.
Sintaho, thank you so much for the follow. All right, so there's our delete, and I'm just going to go through here real quick. And actually, I can just compare it against the repo. I'm just going to verify that I got all the parameters for these bad boys. So once again, if you also want to look at the repo, do exclamation point project in chat, and you too can look at the repo. I'm just going to double check these functions are correct before we go on to the actual UI part of it. Just checking. All right, fetch to dos. All right, looks good. So select. Yep. Yep. Okay, toggle completion. There. Oh, did I miss something in the fetch? Oh, you're correct. I did. So in add to do. Sorry. Yes, good point. I missed that. Yeah. So what we're doing here in add to do, and that was just the result of my testing. It was basically what this. So just adding in a little additional an additional condition here. Else if array dot is array data. It's basically, this is basically just only only appending that task to the, it's only doing the spread operation if there's already data in the array, because if you try to do a spread operation against an empty array, you get an error. So that's what I figured out when I was testing, is that yeah, it no likey doing a spread operation against an empty array, and you get an error if you do that. So I had to add this additional check in here to say, hey, only do that if there's data in the array. Yeah. Oh, chain calls to be indented after the starting line. Yeah, and I was doing that in the original version. I'll fix that. If you look at the repo, I did do it there, but I got sloppy. So I'll just indent these real quick, because I agree. I think it looks better. There. I did it in some places. I know. Yeah, the GitHub source does that. Yeah, exactly. So, and I wrote the GitHub source, so I did it. I did it right the first time. Yeah. All right, we'll save that. Okay, yeah, that was a good catch on the is array thing, because we might have gotten an error there if it was trying to do that spread operation when the array was empty. So good catch. Good catch. All right, let's hope I got everything else. Otherwise, let's keep cooking, and we'll deal with any errors as we find them. That's what we usually do anyway. Screw it, we'll do it live, as always. All right, I'm just making sure I got all my parameters. Okay, great, awesome. So we're done with the function part of it. And so with React, the way that React works is that with React, the way that React works is you are essentially writing a giant function for each part of your UI. And that function can contain both logic and appearance elements, so how the UI looks. So it contains both the logic and the appearance of that part of the user interface. And so you can break for larger apps, you can break your user interface up into multiple chunks, and those are called components. And so those components can contain both logic and appearance. So for example, if you had, let's say, a web page that had an image, a paragraph, and then a form. And obviously, the form is going to be interactive, right? The user is going to interact with that form and cause the appearance to change. But the text may not change. I mean, the picture could be, let's say, a rotating slideshow or something like that. So you have a rotating slideshow, which rotates on its own. You have some static text in a paragraph. And then at the bottom, you have a form which the user can interact with. So each one of those in React, each one of those can be a separate component with its own logic and its own, essentially, it controls its own logic and its own appearance. They're self-contained. And so that's one of the cool things about React, is that you're creating these little modules, um, these little, I don't know what a good analogy would be, but these little building blocks of your UI, and each one of them is self-contained. They all fit together, but they can operate independently of each other. And so in this case, we're going to be building like basically one giant component, because we don't need multiple components. However, we could have broken out our UI, potentially we could have broken out our UI into, let's say, maybe this add, this part up here could have been a component, and then the list could have been its own component, right? We could have potentially split this into two. We didn't have to, but in this case, we left it as one single component, because anytime I'm, interacting with, making a change to this, it's probably going to affect the list down below. So, but yeah, just that's kind of the way you can think when you're thinking about a React app, is how can I break this user interface down into individual components. So for this particular component, for our app component, we've done the logic part of it. We've done the brains, or the controllers, if you want to think about it that way. Now we need to do the user interface part. So how does it actually look? How does it use all these state variables that we set and show that to the user in terms of this input box and this list? Cerniva, welcome to the stream. Delete to do curly braces are misplaced. I think one of the magenta ones. Ooh, okay, let's look. One of the magenta ones. If error. I think we're okay. In this version that I just built, I just added more braces. The version in the repo, so I like my, oh, no, you're right. No, you're right. Good catch. I was just thinking I added more braces, but that got them to be mismatched. So good catch. Welcome to the stream, by the way. Coming in here, dropping knowledge, fixing errors. I dig it. All right. So now let me make sure I've got matching open close. Yeah, matching open close braces. Okay. Yeah, I think we're okay up here as well. These are all fine. All right, perfect. All right, now time to build out our actual, what the user is actually going to see. So how you do that in React is I'm going to make this code window bigger again. I'm going to make this actually full screen. In React, you simply write a return statement, just like you would for a function, except what we're returning is what the user actually sees. So the visual component is what gets returned. Oh, you've been lurking for a while. That's awesome. I love my lurkers. So when we write this return statement, you're going to see that we're writing what looks like HTML. So we're going to be writing very familiar tags, in fact, starting with a div. So we're going to be writing very familiar tags that look like HTML. But just like if you were writing in something like EJS, this is not truly HTML. It will render as HTML in the browser. And so when you're writing it out, it looks like HTML, it renders as HTML, but it's really not. It's actually JSX, which again is like, fancy hat on top of JavaScript, just adding more functionality, including the ability to write something that looks like HTML tags, but really isn't. So it's going to be all the familiar ones you recognize, and you're going to use them in familiar ways, such as adding class names. So this one, our top one, is going to have a class name of app, and we can add some inline styling. So style is going to be display of flex. So if you want to think about it as HTML, you mostly can. Flex direction is going to be column. This is just going to make sure that everything is centered. Flex direction is going to be column, and then we're going to align items in the center. There we go. All right, inside of there, we're going to have an H1. Unfortunately, Emmet is not my friend inside of React. I'm going to call it Supabase to do app on stream. Have our H1 and then another div. And inside of this div is where we're actually going to put the input box along with the add button. So this one is going to have style of display flex again. And align item center. Now, I'm not the best styling person in the world, as you all well know. I'm a backend developer by day, so my styling may not be the best, but I think it works anyway. Junko Programmer says, I almost always forget to click the JavaScript on the bottom right to change it to JavaScript JSX. Yeah, you can also, when you create your files, you can name them with the JSX extension. Actually, I don't know that I've ever clicked that. Let's try that. JSX. Try that. Okay. Yeah, I always forget to do that, so might as well, right? All right, inside of there, we'll have an input box. There we go. Now now autocomplete is working, so good call. So it'll be type text, and then we'll have a placeholder value of new task. That makes it marginally faster. New task. And then a value of new task. So the value that we're setting here is essentially the so this is kind of important what we're doing here. So the placeholder is just going to be a string that says new task. As soon as you start typing in there, it's going to change. However, the value that we're setting here in this input box is what's stored in our state variable. So if we're talking about straight up HTML, I can just build a plain old HTML page with an input box, and I can type into that box and it's going to show me that text, right? Just plain HTML, forget about React or JavaScript or anything. If I just build a plain old Neopet style HTML page, um, I can put it in an input box and I can type in that box and it's going to show me what I'm typing there. However, what we're doing with React is essentially with React, we want to control everything. We don't want any HTML elements, getting too big for their britches and trying to control any text or any behavior or anything like that. So any default behaviors by any HTML elements, we are going to take control of those via state and control them ourselves. And so essentially that's what we're doing here. We are taking away that we're essentially we're controlling the value that's displayed in this box by whatever is stored in our state variable. And I'm going to show you how we do that here at the very next thing I type. So we're going to say, I want to make sure also this isn't going behind the okay, it's not going behind the chat window yet. So very next thing I'm going to say is on change we're going to set new task and set it to e.target.value. Okay, I'm going to make this window smaller because I know that went behind the chat box. So hopefully that's visible now. Okay, there we go. It's visible. Good. All right, so what are we doing here? We're essentially removing all the default behavior of this particular input box, and the value that's going to be shown in the box is whatever is stored in that new task state variable. And on change is saying as the person is typing in the box. So on change literally means it's an event handler. So anytime something happens to this component, in this case, the input box. So the way you interact with an input box is by typing, right? So as soon as you are typing in the box, anytime you type in the box, it's going to add that value, whatever you are typing, whether you're deleting or whatever you're doing, it's going to add that to the new task state and then immediately display it as the value in the box. Okay, so let's go through that again. What we're doing here is we're essentially capturing what's being typed, storing it in our state variable, in our new task state variable, and then immediately displaying it back for the person to see. So for them, it's no different than the standard behavior of any box. Little do they know that behavior is being entirely controlled by our React state variables. It's not the default behavior that they normally see in a text box. Instead, that behavior has been elevated up to the level of our watchers, our state variables, which are then controlling what gets displayed back down in the box. Okay? And I wanted to pause and talk about this because it's super common. You'll see this. This is usually what happens in React apps. You're not generally going to see the default behavior of things like text boxes or input boxes being preserved. You'll generally see it abstracted up into a state variable. Like the inputs are captured, stored in a state variable, and then sent back down to be displayed in the box. So you always see this layer of elevation in React apps. All right. So if you ever see this in a React app, don't let it, don't get it twisted. Don't let it flip you, because all it's doing is just removing the default behavior of just showing what you typed and storing it in a state variable instead, and then displaying it in the box. So once again, no difference to the user, but this is what React does. It it needs to control all elements of the UI and control what's just shown to the user at any given point. So we need to abstract out these default behaviors. What's in the box? Yeah. All right. Now, the next thing we just need to add is a button. So we'll add our button. And once again, same like we did for the input box. Once again, we're going to add an event handler. So you might notice that sounds very similar to event listener, right? We all know what event listeners are. Event handlers are, again, they're just handling an event. So when an event happens, they are going to do a thing. And in this case, what's happening is on click, we're going to call the add to do function, which is going to write that whatever they put in this input box, it's going to write that into the database. All right, then we'll style it. And Becca says, do you always do CSS like that? No, I don't. In this case, I just did it inline because I was lazy, and there's not much CSS here. But no, I do normally like to keep separation of concerns and use tail or and put it in its own CSS file or use Tailwind or something else. But I don't normally do inline. Tailwind or bust. Yeah. All right, so style. But I got lazy and decided to do inline CSS. Margin left is going to be 0.5. And then the button text is just going to be add. All right, so that should be our input box. And then after that, we just need to add the list, which is going to show the items down below it. So as a reminder, it's going to look like this. So we just built this part. We built the input box and the add button. And then we need to add the list items as well as the toggle and delete buttons. So each of these buttons are going to call, this one's going to call our toggle function. This one's going to call our delete function. And double clicking on any of these items is going to make them editable. So that's going to call our edit to do function. All right. So we'll have a UL here. And I'm actually just going to copy this styling. Now, if I want to dynamically generate a list, let's say I have an array. In this case, I have an array of to-dos. If I want to dynamically generate the individual LIs which go in this list, what should I use? How should I do that? If I have an array of an unknown length and I want to go through and dynamically generate a certain count of LIs, how would I do that? Exactly. Yes. Probably the best method to use there would be the map array method. Correct. Yeah. So we're going to do that. I'm going to say to-dos dot map, and we're going to loop through each to-do, and we're going to essentially add the list tags. So inside of for each to-do, we're going to essentially wrap it in an LI. And I'm going to type this out first, and then I'll say what I'm doing. Style. And I'm going to copy the style. Okay, go. All right, and then we'll talk about, I think I'm also missing am I missing a bracket? I might be missing a bracket. That's all right, we'll figure it out. All right, so what we're doing here is we are looping through each to-do, and we're wrapping it in an LI. And you'll notice that I had to give it a key. So one thing that React requires is anytime you are looping through or iterating through an object of some kind, maybe it's an array or an object or something like that, you have to specify a key value. And what this tells React is it helps React get a fix on which item is being updated or changed at any given time. So React works by looking for changes, right? It looks by watching for changes in specific parts of the UI. However, at any point, you could maybe potentially delete an item, right? You could potentially delete an item, or you could completely, change the text of one of these tasks. You could delete it, you could completely change the text, and after it's changed, React might lose track of it, right? Because it has no point of reference anymore. If you delete an item, how does it know which one changed? The whole list is going to get maybe shrink by one, right? Maybe if you delete one item in the middle, the whole list is going to go like this. And so everything has changed position. Or if you completely change the text of an item, how does React know where it went? What happened to it? It's completely different now. And so you have to specify a unique key inside things like lists, or anytime you're performing an iterative operation, looping through something, that allows React to get a fix on which item is being edited at any given time, no matter what its position is or how much the visible text has changed. Okay, so if you try to set up a looping list item without a key, I think you can still do it. Can you do it, or will you just? I know you'll get an error, but I don't remember if it still works or not. Almost always forget to use, yeah, when rendering components. Oh, did I forget a closing tag somewhere? I always do that. Well, where did I miss it? I think my UL is okay. Oh yeah, but I think I may have another issue here because it's flagged a couple things as red. End of line 92. Yeah, I'm not quite done with the LI margin center, text align center. Okay, yeah, close that. That fixes that part. But I think I still have a syntax error somewhere. It's okay, we'll find it. All right. So now that closes the opening tag for the LI. And Dan says, "Mine Wolf, do you come up with these metaphors on the spot? They're pretty good." Yeah, I do. I just think of whatever comes first to my brain. So I'm glad they're clicking with somebody at least. I never know if they're any good or not because I come up with them on the spot. So, all right. So our editing ID here. Oh, thank you for the hydrate. Ooh, delicious. Yeah, my voice always gets a little scratchy toward the end. So if they have clicked on something and the item that they have clicked on is equal to the particular ID that's being looped through, we're essentially going to change that from a text like this to an input box which contains that text because we want them to be able to edit it. So if they've clicked on it, or essentially if they've double clicked on it, we want to change that to something that they can edit. So essentially what we're doing here is a ternary operator. So that's what you'll see. If editing ID equals to do ID, then we add an input box. All right, input. And our type for that input box is going to be text. And the value of that is going to be the text of the item that they clicked on. So essentially we want to give them the starting text of the item that they clicked on. So it's just going to be an input box populated with whatever text of the item that they clicked on. I want to get a mug that is asking about 100 devs. Oh, that's a good idea. I like that. And then, once again, on change, so as they make edits to that, on change, we're going to take whatever they typed and we're going to set it as the new text. So once again, same principle. We're controlling the behavior of this input box. We're controlling the behavior of this input box, capturing the values that they're typing, saving those values, and then as soon as they say that they're done, we send that new value up to the database and run our update function. And so how do we do that? Well, in this case, there's no button. So all we need to do is just say on blur, on blur. Now you may not have heard of on blur before, but I think it's kind of nifty. I was researching, how to do that for this particular project. And I think I've only used this once before, but essentially what on blur means is just when you click away from the thing that you're currently clicking on. So you're clicking on a thing, or you're interacting with a text box, right? You're typing in it, and then you click away from that text box. That essentially acts as a blur, even though it's not really a blur, but it's putting the text box out of focus. Yeah, exactly. And so when you're clicked on something, and you may have seen this in like video games, if you're playing a video game, um, it if you click away from that video game window into something else, it pauses the game usually, right? And they call that focus. So focus is either on the game window or elsewhere. And so it's either in focus or in blur, where you're not focused on it right now. So it's either focused or blur, focused or blur. And so that's what this is doing. On blur, when you click away, then call our update to do and pass in the ID. And that's going to go ahead and write that change to the database. Yeah, it's essentially loss of focus. But it would have been nicer if they called it focus loss or something like that, on focus loss. But they chose to call it blur because it's the opposite of focus, and I guess it's just fewer letters. So who knows? But anyway, that's what that's for. All right, and then let's see, I need to close this tag. That. Okay, and I think I know what I may have done wrong up top. Sorry, let me just fix something real quick. I think I'm missing a bracket up here somewhere, so we'll figure it out later. It's just gonna, we're gonna see some red values here, but I'm gonna keep going. So it's okay. We shall figure it out. All right, so we're going through the map, right? We're looping through our to-dos and creating our list items. If it's an item they've clicked on, then we change it into an input box. However, if it's not an item that they've clicked on, then it's just going to be a regular span, essentially. So this is the second part of our little ternary here. So we're going to give it a style. And then we'll have another div. And inside of that div, we'll have a span. And that span will have its own style. I'm copying and pasting this. There. All right, so what we're doing here is just for each of these list items, if you click the toggle button, it puts a line through it. And that toggle, whether or not this item has the line through it, should be controlled by whether the is completed value is true or false. So inside of our table, right, we're tracking that. We're saying is completed true, is completed false. If it's completed, we want it to have the line through it. So our style is text decoration, check if the to-do is completed. If it is, then the style should be line through, else style is none. All right, and the second thing here is on double click, we want to essentially turn it into an input box, which is what we have up here. So on double click, we're going to do two things. We're going to set the editing ID to the current ID and set editing text to whatever the current text is. There we go, semicolon. Okay. And see, so that was just the style part of that. And then what's inside of the span is just the task. All right, so we got our span div. And then the last thing that we need inside of this div, I know we're getting into weird nesting levels here, as Dan said. We're getting into interesting levels of nesting. I know it looks pretty gnarly, but it was mostly just to try to get the styling right, to try to get the list items to have multiple buttons next to them. That's the hard part. Each list item needed to have its own group of buttons, so that was the difficult part. All right, so inside of this, we're gonna have one more div here, and this is gonna contain our buttons. So style for our buttons is just gonna be margin left. Waiting for the break tag. I didn't use any break tags this time. Aren't you proud of me? I was good. And then we'll have two buttons. All right, so I dropped those in, tab those over. All right. Close and open, div, align. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, so these are just our two buttons, and it's just these two right here. So it's our toggle button and our delete button. Okay. And all these are doing is, once again, we have event handlers, and on click, we want to toggle completion. So we're calling that toggle completion function, and what that's doing is it's going up to the database and it's flipping is completed to be true or false. And the thing is, once we do that, once we do toggle completion, so if somebody clicks that button, it flips it to true or false. And as soon as we do that, our watcher, our state watcher, is going to notice that change, and it's going to update the appearance of that item and change the styling and put a line through it. So it's going to trigger this condition of right here, changing the style appropriately to line through or none. So React is going to see that this changed. It's going to update this. It's going to update the is completed status to true or false in the database. Fetch down the updated list with that status change. React is going to go, uh-oh, we have a status change here. I see something's different. And it's going to loop through again and set the line through styling to the appropriate value based on this logic right here. All right, now our second button is the delete button. And as soon as you click that, it's going to call our delete to do function, which we built up top. It's going to call that. It's going to go up to the database, delete that item. Once again, it's going to fetch down the updated list with that item gone. And React is going to say, oh man, an item got deleted. I need to re-render the list. So it'll do that. It'll re-render the list with that one item missing. All right, now let's go on a scavenger hunt for my missing bracket. This will be fun. So open and close there. Looks like the problem is right here. So maybe everybody loves a bracket hunt. I'm just making sure that all my functions have open and close brackets. Go. It's good. Use effect is good. Oh, am I missing a closed bracket on my larger function, perhaps? I think I have it. Oh, I'm missing my export statement. I'll fix that. All right, last thing we do is export it. Mini angry, yeah, I'm missing one bracket somewhere. That's all it is. This always happens. No, thank you. So that's open, close. That looks good. All those closed brackets look fine. This button looks fine. Everyone loves a bracket hunt. Yeah, so that app statement, it looks good now. Yeah, there's also a couple red. All right, so what's wrong with my return? Put a semicolon there. Not that it needs it, but maybe it's here. So div, each one. 85. Oh, right here. Yeah, 86. Yep, looking at that one. Style, display flex, line item center. That looks fine. Use the VS Code setting bracket pair to underline everything in the open bracket you clicked on. Okay. Let's see that. Preferences, settings. Is this what I want to enable right here? What do I choose? Active to true? Okay. All right. Save that. Okay, do I need to do anything else? Oh, nice. Cool. I like it. Okay, so it doesn't like this div, which is weird. Yeah, it's not finding the close paren. Oh, neat. Okay, that's neat. I like it. Okay, so look at that. Yeah. Okay, what I'm tempted to do is just copy the return statement from the repo. Because I don't want to make you all sit here and just watch me look at brackets. So I'll just assume I missed one somewhere, which is fine. And I will just grab the whole return statement from the repo and drop it in. Ah, there we go. Fixed it. Who knows, man? Who knows? All right. But that's a neat feature. Thank you for letting me know about that. Because yeah, it's nice to just to see them highlighted in the appropriate color. First try, yeah. Right? First try indeed. Okay. I kind of want to know what I missed. Let's see if I do Control Z. Let's see if this. Ooh. Well, I had different. Yeah. All right. Edit. Redo. Okay. Yeah, I had better spacing in the original, so that's all right. All right, cool. We'll just assume that's fine. And we should be able to run this now. Blows my mind. Bracket pair isn't default, right? Yeah, that's a nice feature. I dig it. All right, so I've saved it. Now let's try to run it and see what errors we get. So in React, to start your app, all you need to do is do npm start. There's already, you can add your own scripts though if you want to. So you could add a dev script if you wanted, to npm run dev or whatever. But npm start will work pretty similar to like npm run dev. Um, and, if you were using NodeMon in a traditional app. So, and the nice thing about React is that as you're making changes, if you use npm start in dev mode, as you're making changes, it will automatically refresh the app for you, which is pretty nice. So all you really need is npm start. We're probably going to get an error, but oh, something's already running. Yeah, we'll just use a different port. Okay. All right. Ooh, it's working. Okay. Let's try to add a task. So what should I add? Give me a task. Woohoo, indeed. I'm genuinely surprised. Testing. Find missing bracket. Hey! All right, laundry. Do laundry. Hey, nice. All right, now we didn't find the missing bracket, but we did cheese our way around it by pasting from the repo. So I'm going to toggle this to completed. Hey! Check it out. All right. I'm going to say walk dog. Add that. And I'm going to delete laundry because I already did laundry today and I don't even want to be reminded about it. So I'm going to toggle it. Let's see, we'll toggle this. And then I'm just going to straight up delete it. Hey, nice. All right, now I'm going to, I want to edit this one. We're going to edit walk dog. All right, so you see once I double click on that, it turns it into an input box. I'm going to say walk dogs. Let's say I want to maybe walk my neighbor's dog as well. So I can edit it like this, and then I click away, and now it's been updated. Peachy. All right, I'm going to add wash dishes. I do need to do that. My dishwasher is broken, so I'm washing everything by hand. All right, wash dishes. There we go. Now let's take a look at how this looks in our database. So if I go back into Supabase here, I'm just going to do a select star from to-dos. We'll run this. And there we go. So everything is being stored successfully inside of our database, inside of our table, and the values are being tracked appropriately. So we are writing to the backend here and reading from the backend successfully. Hooray. All right. So, indeed. Icefire says, can't resolve TS node. So Icefire, make sure that, did you CD into your directory? You actually have to, before you can run your React app, you have to make sure you've CD'd actually into the project directory. So just make sure that you're in the right folder, because when you use create React app, it's going to create a new folder at a level below wherever you're currently at. So if I'm in, my documents folder, I have to CD into the actual project folder itself after I create it. And then after that, then do npm start. So try that. That might work. That's a common thing that folks forget to do. When you do the initial create React app, it actually gives you a little message saying, all right, next thing you need to do is CD into your project directory and then do npm start. But, most of the time you're not immediately running your app. So that message gets, obscured by everything else that you're doing. So I think we're cooking. But all that formatting and React and stuff aside, looking back at just the at the important part, which was talking to the database. Oh, Icefire says that it added an import TS node line to my Superbase client JS for some reason. Yeah, it did that to me too. It seems like this, if you type this create, as soon as you type the word create, it thinks that you're trying to do something else. Even if you're typing create client, it tries to put an additional import statement there. So that's probably what happened. Oh, good, it's running. Hooray. All right. But thinking back to the actual important part, which was talking to the database, right? So talking to the database, if you know SQL or the basic structure of SQL, you can pretty easily translate that into this more JavaScript friendly syntax, right? It's the same elements, just in a slightly different order and written as chained methods. Let's blame AI. So hopefully this is somewhat illuminating in how, yeah, it's really not much different than talking to like a MongoDB database, right? Um, you're just taking your SQL, slicing it up into its individual components, into its individual, essentially, you're taking your SQL and you're slicing it into its individual keywords, right? The select, the from, the order, all of those are the keywords that drive SQL. And you're just putting them in a slightly different order and treating them like methods, because that's how JavaScript works. The only weird thing is the lack of the where clause. Totally get that, but it may be possible to write these in a different way so that you can have a more traditional where clause. I'll need to look that up and see. Um, add is not adding it. So check your database. The next thing to do, iced fire, the next thing to do would be to go into your Supabase database and do this, do a select star against your table and see, maybe it's written right into the database, but it's just not showing up, in your UI. So that's the nice thing. Again, that's the nice thing about a relational database backend, is that you can really easily query it and see, okay, what's working, what's not, what records are writing, what records are not, just using raw SQL. So that's what I would try next. You can also do this Supabase AI thing, and I haven't really tried it yet. But if you don't know SQL, this might be a helpful thing where you can just tell the AI what you want, right? Like kind of like you do with ChatGPT, right? You give it a command in plain English, it translates it into SQL for you. So if you don't know how to write something in SQL, you might try to use this AI tool to see if it can build the query for you. Oh yeah, I figured that might have been what happened to Icefire. It's there. I guess it's adding but not showing it afterwards. Okay, yeah, good start. It's try reloading the page and see if it shows up. So do like a full refresh on the page. I bet it will. And also look in the console for errors. See if there's something that's maybe not reading properly. But yeah, there you go. So pretty simple app, basic CRUD, but hopefully this gives you kind of a little bit of a jump start into, if you want to try to use Supabase as your backend, the actual communication with the database is fairly simple, right? If you can write your query out in SQL, you can then pretty easily translate that into the individual JavaScript bits that you need. And I think we're probably going to sort of, I don't know if we're going to use Supabase every time for backends of the apps that we're going to be building here on my streams, but I imagine we're going to be doing mix and match with both. We're probably going to be doing a mixture from now on. We're probably going to do a mixture of MongoDB and Supabase backends, just to kind of get everybody comfortable with using either or pretty much interchangeably. Um, who knows? We might do some cases where we build an app, maybe with a MongoDB backend to start with, and then we convert that into a relational backend. That might be fun, where we build out an app with MongoDB and then we port it over to, Supabase. Oh, you didn't have your use effect hook. There you go. Good troubleshooting. Pablo says, how hard would it be to add authentication for user accounts? So Supabase actually has pretty good authentication built in. I haven't messed around with it too much, but they have a lot of options for authentication. So actually, I think probably not too hard. And I'm sure we'll do that in the future. Because yeah, Supabase has tons of options for authentication, even down to like individual rows and columns. You can have, access controls on those. So pretty robust. Yeah, pretty robust. Would we ever see how to connect an Express app to a SQL DB? Yeah, I'm gonna assume it's gonna be pretty similar to this. Very similar syntax. I mean, because it's just these functions here are basically what you would normally put in an Express app. It's basically what you would put in your controllers, right? If you're using MVC structure, you would have all these functions, just pretty much the same functions, just in your controllers, right? And then you would be sending that data down to your front end. So pretty similar syntax, just in a different location. But yeah, I imagine we'll be experimenting with this more in the future, building some apps in MongoDB, some in Supabase, and kind of just alternating between the two. And also maybe thinking more about what's the right tool for the job, right? When should we pick a relational database? When should we pick a document-based database? What is the right choice for the particular work that we're doing at that given moment? Which could be a deciding factor when you're building things for your clients, right? When you're building things for your freelance clients, what is the best choice for the particular thing that I'm building? For example, if we have an app where there's a lot of variability in the input, where we have a lot of things coming in that we don't know how big they'll be, we don't know what fields are going to be populated, we don't know, things are going to be fairly optional and random, then a document database is probably a good choice. MongoDB is probably a better choice than a SQL database because you don't know the structure beforehand. This data is just coming in, and you want to capture it without really knowing beforehand exactly what it's going to look like. So that's a good choice for a document database. But if you need to have highly structured data where you're going to need to have it be very precise and very transactional, then relational databases are definitely the better choice for that. Oh, you're talking about standalone, like a standalone database, like Postgres. Yeah, yeah, we might do that. The Yeah, the challenge there is repeatability for the viewer, right? There's a lot more overhead that goes into that. So thinking about how are folks going to be able to follow along with something like that, with all the initial setup that goes into configuring that sort of thing. So that's the trade off, right? Yeah, it's cool, but how do you make it something that's teachable and actionable by the viewer? Friendly says, does the EQ relate to Postgres, or is it a React syntax thingy? So this is talking about this part. So this is all coming from Supabase. These are all Supabase methods. So we installed that Supabase dependency, and so these are all Supabase methods themselves. None of this is not native to React. This is coming. These are methods that are coming from Supabase. Yeah. So if we look at real quick here, let's see. Can I get to the documentation here? That documentation docs. There we go. So, like I said, the Supabase documentation is pretty good. You can see there's plenty of documentation for auth if you want to read up on that. Database. I found a great repository of like snippets. Let's see. I just got to figure out where it was. Database functions. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So they have a bunch of. Oh, this is raw SQL, but I wanted. I saw they had a big repo of like client side functions as well, not just SQL. Oh, here we go. Call database functions using JavaScript. This is it. So there's a video you can watch. Call database functions using JavaScript. Not a video. I don't want to watch a video. Where's all the snippets? Boo. Give me code snippets. I saw them before. Let's see. Supabase. Supabase. Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted. So yeah, they have a whole, this is their JavaScript client library, which is what we installed. Yeah, they are really good docs. So some folks like video. You can watch a video introduction to using Superbase with JavaScript if you want to. Um, but here they give you all sorts of examples, like code snippets. So how you can do a select, how you can do a select star, how you can insert, how you can update. So here, this is essentially the same update statement that we did, right? We did docs in dark mode. I know, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. So here you can see this is essentially the same update statement that we did, right? Const error, await from countries update EQ. And so they give you all these examples that you can just go in and copy and paste and just drop these right um, into your app. So you can do, you know, updates, upserts, and essentially what an upsert is just it will update the value if it exists. So if there's already an existing value that meets the criteria, it will update it. If a value does not exist, it will then go insert that value with the appropriate, it'll insert that row with the appropriate values. So that's what if you ever heard the word upsert, that's what that is. It's update or insert and delete. So just like we did. And it also gives you, this is essentially the sequel. So it even gives you, so it gives you the JavaScript version, and then it also gives you the sequel that would essentially generate the same result, which I really like. So it tells you exactly how to translate between JS and SQL, just like we did in the app itself, right? So for example, in the insert, tells you, well, it's essentially just a create data statement, boo. But so the data, okay, so here, yeah, it's giving you the data source and where that data is coming from. Okay, I get it. And let's see, what are they doing here? Oh, essentially, yeah, how we can perform a function call, how you can use filters. So some folks were asking, what about more filters? What about multiple, uh, what about multiple possibilities in that where clause, right? Because really the only thing that we did is we just did equals, right? We said if ID is equal to ID or whatever. But here they give you a bunch of examples on how to do other things. So column is equal to a value, column is not equal to a value. So there you can use an EQ instead of just EQ. Column is greater than, using GT. Some notes there. All right, column is greater than or equal, less than or equal. You get it. Or especially another common one is like. So if you have a string and you want to find values that or rows that have a matching value to that string, that's a very common thing. So there's the like keyword that you can use. But yeah, just an absolute ton of comparisons, and really any type of comparison you would want to do, they give you examples that you can literally copy and paste into your application. So and then they talk about modifiers. So this is for authentication. So when folks were talking about auth earlier, can we do auth? So they give you a ton of examples here on how to do auth, how to sign in using various methods, how to retrieve, update, all this user stuff, how to do multi-factor authentication, and how to be the administrator of your authentication. So extremely exhaustive documentation with a bunch of copy and paste examples, which I really appreciate. Dan says that's actually a pretty cool feature. The like method. Don't think there's an equivalent in Firestore. Yeah, so like is kind of a fundamental thing that SQL does. That sort of fuzzy string comparison, where you don't have to match the whole string. You can use wildcards and really substitute any part of that string with a wildcard and get a approximate match or a list of approximate matches, which I use a lot personally at work. So definitely check out the docs if you're interested in Supabase. They really hold your hand and walk you through building whatever you'd like to build for your particular application. So yeah, I hope you found this at least entertaining, um, and hopefully makes using a relational database with your app a little bit less daunting. That's kind of the goal here, is to make it so that if a client says, "Hey, I have a SQL database, can you build me an app off of this, off of this SQL database?" You can basically be like, "Yeah, I think I can." Figure it out, and you already know the basics of SQL, how to do the basic CRUD operations, and yeah, how to create something that's not in MongoDB, which I think is important just because relational databases are the most common database type on the planet. So you should at least have a level of familiarity, if not comfort, with working with relational databases. Later, taters. See you, Nibs. All right. Well, I have to wrap it up for today because I have to do something before 7 p.m. So I got a jet, but we'll find somebody to raid. I'm sure there's lots of lovely folks online this evening. But feel free to ask any last questions while I'm digging up a raid partner here. Super Wolf teaching Superbase. Thank you, Copper Lily. Frankly says, got any kittens? Not at the moment, no. Um, I'm actually doing a little bit of traveling this month, so I'm probably not going to take any kittens during the month of September, just because I'll be in and out various times. So it's just too much of a hassle to take them back to the shelter, pick them up to the shelter, blah blah blah. So in October I will make myself available for kittenage again. Alrighty. Looking at rates. Who do we got? Ooh, we got some choices today. Um, Sir Navar, thank you so much for the follow.
Just followed.
All right, we've got Acorn 1010, Wallaber, Zorchenheimer. Yeah, we've got some choices. So as always, let me know if you have any suggestions. Otherwise, we'll take a look at what folks are doing and we'll pick somebody. Thank you, Sir Navar. No worries. You're allowed. Anybody who's out there who's just lurking, you're allowed to lurk. You don't have to follow. You don't have to sub. Do whatever you want to do. Whatever feels comfortable to you. As always, I appreciate follows, but hey, I'm not making a living off of this. I'm just here to impart some knowledge to y'all, and I like hanging out with y'all. So, all right, let's see. What is Acorn 1010 doing? They are playing chess, I think. We'll go back. I want to find somebody who's hopefully working on like actually doing some dev work. Oh, is Madeline starting their stream? Maddie. Mad. Oh, I gotta try to spell that. Let me see. We'll hit them up if they're live. Ooh, yeah, they are live. All right, let's go. We're gonna raid Madeline. Uh, they're super fun, great person. Yeah, definitely show them some love. They're pretty awesome. So show them some love, say hi, and I will see you all next weekend. So I don't know what we're gonna be doing, but probably another build of some kind. We'll probably be building something, but we'll see. So as always, let me know if you have any suggestions. Shoot me up on hit me up on Discord, Twitter, whatever. And yeah, check out the repo, get the app going yourself, and have fun with Superbase. All right, I'll see y'all later. Raid is starting now. No worries, AppPod. Yeah, definitely catch the VOD. And I'll be moving some stuff to YouTube here pretty soon. So no worries. It's working. Yay! Good job, Icefire. Alrighty, I'll see y'all later.